myself. My name is Gene Reindell. I will be the facilitator for this Joint Stakeholders Task Force. And we'll actually take a little bit of privilege as the facilitator to do a little bit of introductions before we actually elect the chair and vice chair of this task force. And then we'll call the meeting to order at that point. Also, we're going to talk about ground rules that we will be using for these meetings, but we will do that as part of calling the meeting to order and shortly after that. But I would like to go through some of the ground rules for this meeting as we get started. First of all, out of respect for everyone's time, one of my roles as facilitator is to keep the task force meeting on topic and within the time allotted. Therefore, I may interrupt a conversation and ask that we put an end to a discussion so that we can indeed keep the meeting on track. I will also insist that all discussions and public comments be respectful to each other and to other parties involved in this task force, including the Burbank, Glendale, Pasadena Airport Authority, Los Angeles World Airports, and the Federal Aviation Administration. Everyone at this meeting has an interest to reduce the effects from aircraft departures wherever possible and coming to consensus on a proposal that works for all the communities involved. Now we must establish some ground rules. These rules are meant to create an atmosphere where the members of the body and the members of the public can attend to this important matter efficiently, fairly, respectfully, and with full participation. To encourage and respect expression of all views, meeting rules prohibit clapping, booing, or shouts of approval or disagreement from the audience. This task force will be most productive in a collegial and respectful environment. Abusive or demeaning behavior will not be tolerated. The task force chair, once elected, has the right to cut off discussion that does not maintain common courtesy and decorum. This is a focused meeting with a strict 3-hour time limit. Tonight's meeting will conclude at 9:30 p.m. Again, all discussion and public comment are restricted to issues on aircraft operations and ideas to alleviate noise. You will note that there is a public comment period on the agenda, or you will note that once we get to it. If you wish to speak, please obtain a speaker card from the back of the room where you entered near the center entrance door. To allow time for as much public comment as possible, the designated chair will set up a time for each speaker. Please note that due to California's Brown Act, items brought up during today's public comment period cannot be considered by the task force at this meeting. So I want to thank you in advance for adhering to this time limit and for keeping your comment on topic and respectful. Now, if I may, this is what I'm calling the pre-meeting agenda. We'll go through some introductions, talk about the purpose in front of this task force, introduction to some aircraft noise, actually looking at legislation in terms of aircraft noise, which trying to bring some background, kind of level the field, make sure people have some of the basic background information, and then talk about NextGen and the Metroplex. At that point, once I've taken those liberties to introduce these ideas and objectives, we will then look to the election of the task force officers and then call the meeting to order at that point. The elected chair at that point will call the meeting to order. So with that, I would ask that the task force members go ahead and introduce yourselves. Let's start here at the right end. All the mics are on, I believe.
Turn it on, thanks. Doug Minsman here on behalf of LA City Councilmember Paul Krikorian, who is on his way.
Justin Ornstein here on behalf of Councilmember David Rue, who is also on his way.
Jarrett Thompson.
They're always on.
On? Okay. Jarrett Thompson on behalf of Councilmember Paul Koretz, who could not attend tonight.
No, they're all on, just.
Lauren Paddock here on behalf of Councilwoman Nuri Martinez.
No, they're not.
It's not on. Leah Gonzalez from the Office of Congressman Tony Cardenas, who represents the Northeast San Fernando Valley.
John Brodke here on behalf of Congressman Brad Sherman.
Mike Aguilera on behalf of Congressman Adam Schiff. Mike Aguilera on behalf of Congressman Adam Schiff.
Peter Mueller, Deputy State Director for Senator Dianne Feinstein.
Emily Gable-Luddy, Mayor of Burbank.
I'm Terry Tornick, Mayor of Pasadena and a commission member.
Sharon Springer, Vice Mayor of Burbank.
I'm Ara Najarian, Mayor of Glendale.
Okay, now if we will go ahead to the table over there.
Patrick Lamberting, Deputy Executive Director of Planning and Development, Hollywood Burbank Airport.
Can you hear me now? Great. Flora Margaritas with the Van Nuys Airport. I am the manager at the Van Nuys Airport.
Then the FAA, please.
Let's see if we can make this work. Can you guys hear me? Raquel Gervin, Western Pacific Region, Regional Administrator of the FAA.
William Freeman, Community Engagement Officer, FAA.
Justin Cook, HMMH.
That was Justin Cook. He's with HMMH, the same consulting firm as I am. My name's Gene Reindell, Vice President of Harris Miller, Miller & Hanson. So a little bit about HMMH and myself. HMMH was established in 1981 to help airports solve noise problems. HMMH is familiar with NextGen and implementation of the Metroplex. I've been involved in 2 or 3 of those on the terms of the NEPA side, doing the environmental assessment. NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act. HMH is currently involved in similar task force or roundtables such as this at about 10 of them right now that we're supporting. I'm actually working, or 5 of those 10 are really focused exactly what this one is focused on, and that's the implementation of next-gen aircraft procedures, including those involved with the Metroplex. My current and recent involvement with airport community noise roundtables includes airports around Baltimore, Charlotte, Los Angeles, Louisville, Oakland, and San Francisco. So the purpose of the task force is pretty succinct. It's to address community concerns regarding aircraft noise resulting from aircraft departing from Van Nuys Airport and Hollywood Burbank Airport in the southern San Fernando Valley. A little bit, again, with the introduction to noise, I'm going to focus on major noise-related federal legislation. The first is the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, also known as NEPA. What that act did was direct all federal executive agencies to assess all environmental effects of proposed federal agency actions. Then came the Aircraft Noise and Sonic Boom Act, which authorized the FAA to prescribe standards for measurement of aircraft noise and established regulations to abate noise. And then in 1972, the Noise Control Act of 1972, or known also as the Noise Act, it amended the 1968 Act to add consideration of public health and welfare and to add the Environmental Protection Agency to the rulemaking process for aircraft noise and sonic boom standards. Then in 1979 was the Aviation Safety and Noise Abatement Act, also sometimes known as ASNA, which directed the FAA to establish a single system to measure noise and determine exposure of people to noise and identify land uses normally compatible with various noise levels. What came out of that was Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 150. It's the FAA's voluntary program that airports can use to assess aircraft noise and land use compatibility around their airport. The Airport and Airway Improvement Act of 1982 authorized the FAA funding So while Part 150 and the ASNA actually provided a means to do the noise assessment and land use compatibility analysis, funding was actually then provided through the Airport and Airway Improvement Act of 1982. Then in 1990 was ANCA, or the Airport Noise and Capacity Act, which mandated the phase out of the noisiest jets weighing over 75,000 pounds. Those are known as the Stage 2 type jets. And ANCA also placed strict limits on airport proprietors' rights to or ability to impose noise restrictions and access restrictions. What came out of that was Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 161, which an airport can undertake to evaluate noise and access restrictions at an airport. Section 506 of the FAA Modernization and Reform Act of 2012 actually put a phase out in place for jets of less than 75,000 pounds, again, those meeting the Stage 2 criteria. And then just lately, the FAA reauthorization in 2018, it reauthorized the FAA through 2023. Now, I know I'm not intending for you to know all this at this point, but the information's there for you to have, for you to reference back to. And as we go through things, certainly I'm available to help with any questions you might have on those acts. One of the acts that's actually been rescinded, it was actually rescinded, I believe, back in 2006, was the FAA's noise abatement policy that was established in November 1976. The reason I'm bringing it up, because there's still no documentation since that point that points to the established roles and responsibilities, but they're still in existence today, as it's been noted in that abatement policy. So the federal government, for example, is responsible for source emissions, air traffic control, funding, and safety oversight. I've also underlined in bold the text that I think is pertinent to this body to understand. So the federal government is the entity responsible for air traffic control. State and local governments, for example, also they have compatible land use planning and control. Aircraft operators, they're responsible for noise-sensitive schedules, cockpit procedures, how the airplane is flown, and fleet improvements. Air travelers and shippers bear the cost. Current and prospective residents seek to understand and act accordingly. And airport operators' primary responsibility for planning and implementing all noise abatement and compatible land use measures. So now just briefly, also an introduction into NextGen and also the Metroplex. NextGen is the FAA's modernization of our nation's air traffic system, or air transportation system. The goals of NextGen are to increase safety, efficiency, capacity, predictability, and resiliency of American aviation. And we will be talking about these throughout, I think, the scope of this task force. NextGen does bring together dozens of innovative technologies, capabilities, and procedures that improve how we fly. NextGen actually is a way to think of it as a new toolbox that's provided by the FAA to be able to make changes to the airspace. So they can do things using NextGen technology, which is also NextGen technologies rely on satellite-based navigation as opposed to all the ground-based navigation aids that we have. So we're in the middle of transitioning from the ground-based to the satellite-based. That's really what NextGen technology is in terms of aircraft procedures. So as I was saying, that the FAA now has more tools in their toolbox at their disposal to help with some of the things that we're looking at trying to accomplish here. The implementation of NextGen aircraft procedures provide really an opportunity for the FAA to reduce air traffic control workload and more efficient use of the airspace. It allows airlines to reduce cockpit workload and more efficient operation of their aircraft. It provides improved access and more efficient operations at an airport. And yes, it also can provide the opportunity for reduced emissions and noise. So the So the implementation of NextGen aircraft procedures, it is the air traffic organization within the Federal Aviation Administration that's responsible for the implementation of aircraft flight procedures. It's from either at a single airport or into a metroplex, such as what occurred here in the Southern California metroplex. Just for definition, metroplex is a metropolitan area with multiple airports and complex air traffic flows, such as we have in Southern California. FAA's goal for implementation aircraft flight procedures within a metroplex is first safety, but also to enhance the way aircraft navigate the complex airspace to improve airport access and make flight routes more efficient. In this area, Burbank, Glendale, Pasadena area, the FAA implemented NextGen aircraft procedures through the SoCal Metroplex, which included Hollywood, Burbank, and Van Nuys airports. This is a graphic that shows, we call these flight track density plots. The more reddish the colors, the more flight tracks in a given year flew in that particular area. And so the lighter blues are the less number of flight tracks that flew through in a particular area. You can see that there were some changes between 2016, which was before the FAA implemented aircraft operating procedures included in the Metroplex using NextGen technology. And then the 2018 source shows post-Metroplex because they had implemented back in 2017. So we're showing the year before and the year after. Now this is only Burbank departures. There's a lot more to the story. I just wanted to put something out there to let you know some of the things that we can do technologically to show and find some of the nuances and differences in Metroplex. With that, that's the end of my introductions. We can move on to the election of the task force officers. So before we do that, it would probably be good to know what your responsibilities are as the chair and vice chair. So the chair would really be drafting future meeting agendas and running the meetings. The chair would be responsible for keeping to the agenda, redirecting discussions when required, and managing the time. Of course, I will help facilitate that with the chair as well. The vice chair is simply to support the chair and act as a chair when the chair is unable to make a meeting. Any questions on the responsibilities from the task force? Okay, with that, I will open it up and request a call for nominations.
I would like, this is...
Yeah, real quick, I need to remind, I didn't say that you need to state your name, unfortunately, each time before you speak, because the court reporter is behind me and she's not going to be able to know who's speaking.
I'm Mayor Najarian from Glendale. I would like to nominate Mayor of Burbank, Emily Gable Luddy, to be chair.
This is Terry Tornick from Pasadena. I would second that nomination.
Okay, is there any discussion or any further nominations? Hearing none, would we go ahead and call for a vote then? All those in favor of the nomination say so by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Fortunately, or unfortunately, only the people on the task force are able to vote. Please keep the interruptions to a minimum, please, as we proceed. So,
if we could stipulate that the federal representatives are not voting members, just so the public is aware.
Oh, thank you very much. So, yes, we're going to cover this. You'll see there are 13 seats at the table here. Only 8 of those are voting members because the federal representatives are unable to be voting members of this body. So thank you for that. So there were only 8 able to vote.
And I'm sorry, a quick point of order. Justin Ornstein, Office of Councilmember David Rue, are you just taking nominations for the position of the chair right now?
That's correct, for the chair at this time.
Thank you.
Any other nominations, any other discussion? Okay, so the chair is indeed, Mayor.
Well, thank you all for your confidence in me. I noticed nobody asked me if I wanted to accept, but I'm happy to do this. It's important. It's an important task. And I think that our next order of business, at least, is to accept nominations for a vice chair. So can I ask someone if they would like to make a nomination for vice chair?
Mayor Justin Ornstein from the Office of Councilmember David Rue. I'd like to nominate the Office of Councilmember Paul Krikorian as vice chair.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Tornick. All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. So Mr. Krikorian, our council member in Los Angeles, is elected vice chair.
Madam Chair, the next order of business is to call the meeting to order.
Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Thank you for being here this evening. We have a long agenda to go through, and I think, as Jean said earlier, we have a fixed amount of time. So I think we're going to try and be as clear as possible as we work our way through it. First, I'd like to ask if we can discuss a bit on item number 2 of the agenda, which are meeting ground rules. And I'd like the facilitator to lead us off, please, in that discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, I have taken the liberty to put down some, if you can go to the slide, if you would, some goals, core values, and examples of ground rules. After I present these, you can discuss them, see if you want to accept them, modify them. It would be at your leisure at that point. So the goal really from what I've come to understand is to have a productive and effective use of everyone's time during this process. Core values are key importance: transparency, accountability, informed choice, and compassion. We all know that this is a very sensitive and emotional issue for the residents, and we need to make sure that we have some stipulated core values of such that I put. Some examples of ground rules for you to assess. First, be respectful, state views and ask genuine questions, share all relevant information, be open and candid, focus on interests, not positions, don't get defensive, don't interrupt, no vulgar or abusive language, and no personal attacks. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Do any members of the task force have any comments on these or anything to add on these as operating values for us to continue our work from? Do task force members agree that by consensus that these would be core values that we want to follow? Yes, yes, I see a lot. It's a little hard to look straight down the line here, so please speak up. I think on that basis, rather than taking a formal vote or a formal adoption, let's accept these as the values from which we will operate during this series of meetings. It's acceptable to everyone. So thank you. We will take these core values that you've introduced. We will use them to guide ourselves. And we ask that we all follow these as we go forward. We have another task, which is item number 3. Does everybody have the agenda? You all should have agendas. Item number 3 is the ratification of the task force bylaws.
Yes, if I may, Madam Chair, I provided, again, if you bring up the slides, I provided a summary. You were all each provided the draft bylaws for you to review prior to coming to this meeting. It says here there are 13 voting members. Already discussed that earlier. That has been changed because the federal appointees are not able to be voting members on this body. So there are actually 8 voting members made up of local elected officials or assigned staff. We do have myself as a third-party facilitator, also non-voting. We have advisors from the Federal Aviation Administration, both airports, Hollywood, Burbank, and Los Angeles World Airports, who operates Van Nuys. They are also non-voting participants and to be thought of as advisors and people you can go to for information. The purpose is to collaborate on solutions to existing aircraft operations affecting communities in the southern San Fernando Valley. Meeting agenda and other materials as available will be distributed 72 hours prior to the meeting. And final product of this task force will be a set of recommendations approved by the task force by majority vote to submit to the FAA for review and consideration for implementation.
And I think I'd like to add, you didn't say it, but at the bottom, it also includes approval requires a majority vote by the members, the voting members. Do you want to take a moment to go through the bylaws, and does anyone have any comments about those? Yes, Mayor Najarian.
I do have a comment. I couldn't help but hear the sigh of dismay when the public learned that their federal elected officials would not be able to vote. I presume this is because that they have some oversight role over the FAA in Congress, and therefore would not be appropriate for them to weigh in at this point, where their true oversight would be in their role as congressmen or senators. Am I somewhat close to that reasoning?
This is Peter Mueller with Senator Feinstein. We received guidance from the House and Senate Ethics Committees advising us that it would be appropriate to participate in these meetings, but not as voting members, because that would be a conflict with the role in the federal government.
Correct.
So.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the other federal representatives? All right. Do members have any other comments on the proposed bylaws? And for this, we do need a formal vote. So if someone would like to make a motion regarding the bylaws, please.
I'll move the bylaws.
And that was Mayor Najarian.
Sorry.
I'm trying to remember, because someone is a court recorder, we need to keep saying our names. Mayor Najarian moves. Is there a second?
I'll second Sharon Springer.
Sharon
Vice
Springer.
Mayor.
Springer seconds. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And so those bylaws are adopted. Thank you. The next order of business tonight is the meeting calendar. And I think that part of the process here is to find out generally what's open for us so that we can meet as efficiently and effectively as possible. And I'll turn it back to the facilitator for some support on how we go about pinning this down.
Yeah, so to think about, this is a task force that's meant to be together for a relatively short period of time to solve very specific issues in front of them. It is likely that regular meetings, like saying we'll meet once a month, may not be the best way to proceed. Given my experience in going through some of these, sometimes you might be able to re-meet in 2 weeks. Sometimes the analysis is just going to take longer that you've requested for us to get back to this body. So we may have to look at 6 weeks or something on that order. But we do know that we want to try to get this done as quickly as possible. And so think about a day of the week that might be best. Is there a day or so that would work best if we are meeting? Are there certain weeks of the month that you just can't meet? If we, say we have to meet in 2 weeks, well, that's a week that we've already said we couldn't meet. So think about, are there particular weeks that aren't any that will not work? And is there a time of day that is the best? And we'll talk more about time of day when we get into the next meeting, which we'll talk about later in the agenda. But for this one, it's just overall, what days of the week are good, or the opposite. If there are certain days that just will not work, let's hear that as well. So that's the discussion I think I would recommend, Madam Chair.
Why don't we continue that discussion for those of you who have nights when you're maybe meeting at council or something like that? are there days of the week that are completely out? And then maybe you could also say days of the week that would work for you. I'll start. Tuesday nights are completely out because we have council meetings on Tuesday nights, but Wednesdays in the evening are good and Thursdays are good.
Yeah, shouldn't we just do this with a doodle poll? Do we really have to have a public discussion about this? I mean,
Yes, we really do.
okay. Monday night is when our council meets, Pasadena.
Madam Chair. Hi, Paul Krikorian. This obviously seems to be a pretty good night for all of us, and judging by the turnout for the public, I'll meet any night, so whatever works for the majority works for me. I would just like to suggest, though, that at least one of these meetings really should be on a weekend, so that everybody who wants to participate but who can't because of work obligations as a member of the public will have an opportunity to come and weigh in on a weekend.
So does that work for everyone then, generally speaking, on a Wednesday?
Okay, time of day, is the evening best? Is during the daytime better? Again, it's this body, also know that it does, daytime tends to limit, you know, public participation, but something, at least discuss, at least agree to that it's certain time of day is better than another.
Yes.
Seems to work. Look at all the people here.
Chair Thompson with Councilmember Corrett's office. I think 6:30 is a reasonable time that allows people to get here during traffic.
I think we have agreement that the evening is better. I think you're absolutely right. It opens the opportunity for greater participation. So 6:30 works. Do I have are there any objections to 6:30? It sounds like 6:30 would be our target time to start.
So it appears to me that Wednesdays, 6:30 is what we should be aiming for for future meetings. It seems to work for this body. Is that correct?
Your vision is 2020.
Okay. We shall proceed then.
Now, we have day of the week, we have time of day. We're not setting a fixed schedule on how often, but before we leave this evening, I expect that we will have a subsequent date decided upon. I think that and I think we would all agree that that's going to be important. Let's move to meeting format then. What options do you suggest on the format of the meeting?
Typically for these meetings, you would want first, obviously, call to order, roll call, and determination of a quorum according to the bylaws so that you know whether you can hold a vote that evening or not. Provide opportunity for public comment not related to items on the agenda. Approve previous meeting minutes. Items related to aircraft operations and possible solutions to community issues. That's really going to probably be the crux of each of the meetings. And then new business, set the next meeting date, time, and location, and adjourn.
Comments on format? Council members? I think as a starting point, that may be the preliminary format. Councilmember Krikorian, you have further comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
That works for me. Somewhat related to format, I guess, was I had a question about that arose out of the discussion from the bylaws. In that this is a Brown Act body, or we're treating it as such, I wanted to make sure that our agendas, all agenda items, the minutes, any reports that are prepared for this body will be accessible to the public through a website or how would the members of the public who are here who would like to have access to those once they're posted 72 hours in advance of the meeting, how would they have access to those?
My understanding is that the Hollywood Burbank Airport has set up a website for this task force. All information will be provided on that website. In addition, each of the task force members would be provided the information by email or however you would want to get that. It could also be that you go to the website, so that would be something you could discuss as well, as how would you like to receive the information prior to the meetings. But yes, it is intended that the agendas and other information pertinent to each meeting would be on the website.
Great. So the posting of agendas and materials in compliance with the Brown Act will also include posting to that website so that it would be readily accessible.
That is my understanding.
Great. Thank you.
Do we have a format where groups that have organized themselves can have a block of time in which they can make presentations?
I think, are you looking to me for that? So,
Well, and also
Okay.
to the members of the task force here. You know, we're going to take testimony tonight and have a kind of time limited so we can get through everybody. But what about groups or organizations that have formed and have come up with would like to make their own presentations?
well,
And that's to the task forces.
if we could, though, it actually goes on to the next slide that I had prepared. Talks about the next meeting. I've put together kind of my view, and it's only mine, so and it's also to be modified as we proceed, but I laid out the next 5 meetings. What I'm recommending for you to consider is, for the second meeting, the presentation of proposed solutions by community groups. Then look at the evaluation results of those. In the third meeting, get to presentation of some draft recommendations. In the fourth meeting, results modified based on discussion at that meeting for the fifth meeting, and then presentation of the final set of recommendations. So that's kind of the procedure I see happening here. Of course, like I said, we can amend as we go. And then if you look at the bottom of that slide, looking at community presentations of solutions, I think what we should talk about here is how do we invite them to participate, and how do we get them on the schedule to do so? Because I think at the next meeting, my recommendation is to try to get those in there. Obviously, we can't have 20 presentations of 20 minutes long, so we need to have some borders around that. I would also state, before we start having this deliberation, is that the FAA has also offered or volunteered to give a short presentation also at that next meeting if we're so prepared to do so.
Do we know yet how long that presentation might be?
Do you know about how long you would want for that presentation?
I think to some extent it depends. We have a lot of material, and we are kind of deferring to the body to let us know what would be of greatest interest. So we can make it as long or as short as depending on what the material is that would be of interest to the task force.
Great, thank you.
Other task force members' comments on this approach? Yes, Councilman Krikorian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So is it the intention, or maybe we should discuss whether it's our intention, at the next meeting to invite up community groups to give their presentations at the second meeting?
I think that would be a good idea.
I do too. And I think, you know, any stakeholder group that has substantial community support, I mean, that should be a fairly discrete list of community stakeholder groups, ought to be given the time that they need to make the presentation that they think appropriate to represent the interests that they represent. So my suggestion would be that perhaps at the next meeting, we hear from the organizations that represent the members of the public. And, you know, that if that takes up the whole agenda, then, you know, that's, I still think that's a productive use of the second.
I think so, yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask everybody, I think it's a good suggestion. I think that the challenge might be if we get a whole lot of groups submitting, and I would rely on your judgment Mr. Rue and others to decide.
And if that were the case, I guess what I would suggest is that maybe it takes more than one meeting to get through them all. But it wouldn't be,
Go ahead.
I mean, and I get, I'm sorry, I don't mean these to be, thank you, but I don't mean these to be buzz lines. For the purpose of discussion of this, the entire point of our getting together to create this task force is to develop community-based solutions to this problem. And so the first order of business that this task force should have is hearing from the community and,
Well, that's
and exhaust, not just in public comment, but actually to have a formal dialogue with the people who've devoted a considerable amount of their time, you know, studying this issue. So, excuse me. So I think I would start with some of the more significant groups that have formed specifically in response to this issue. Perhaps some of our neighborhood councils and other groups that might want to weigh in, recognized residents associations and so on. And if we can't get them all scheduled, if, for example, their anticipated presentations total up to 4 hours or something, then maybe we schedule 2 hours one night, 2 hours the next meeting, and so on. But I guess what I would suggest is I would invite all representatives of such organizations who would like to make presentations. Madam Chair, what would be the appropriate way for them to request that? I guess since you control
Well, I think, you know,
the agenda, that would be appropriately directed to you or to the facilitator? I'm not sure.
It might be that each group or organization that has representation on this task force, such as yourself or Councilmember Rue, that they approach the council members with their request. And so you have a chance to review it. You know, you've worked with them, you've heard from them. There's been a lot of interaction, and you're certainly far more familiar with some of these issues. And I think that perhaps the better option here is for each council member or mayor to choose or find the number of groups, and then we have to figure out how to fit them in.
All right. I think that makes sense. And
Now-
so then we would provide you with a list with an estimate of times.
Of time, yeah, because the other thing is we could have 5 groups each wanting to take a half hour or an hour, and we might be here for 5 hours. It might be gratifying on one hand, but on the other hand, if we're going to really listen and hear what's being said, it's going to be hard to do it, as you said, all at one time.
Yeah.
But I think each council member should suggest the amount of time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
If without objection, I think that's one way we'll proceed going forward to the next meeting. I know that the FAA has offered to make a presentation. I think that we should accord them the opportunity to do that, and that would be part of the next meeting as well. Without objection, then let's proceed with that kind of organization through the next meeting.
Yes.
Does that give you the kind of feedback you need to pull it together?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. We have covered item 6, and I would like to suggest, before we set a specific time for the next meeting, I would also like to suggest that we set aside new business for the moment, and that we go forward with the public testimony for those who came here tonight, and then we come back to this when we're finished with the testimony. Is that okay? So we're gonna flip the agenda here. We're going to go to public comment. Yes.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, we have 72 public comments.
72 public comments. Wow. Does anybody want to surrender their card? No. Let's see. I understand. I know that this is a really tough issue. I know you've been waiting for 2 years. So with 72 cards, We have to be out, we have to be finished with public testimony around 9:20, 9:15. We have 2 hours. So, why don't we roll up our sleeves now and start, but I think we're going to have to limit everyone to either a minute and a half or a minute. 90 seconds? All right. We're going to do 90 seconds. That way we'll fit everybody in.
The group should have 5 minutes.
We're not set up for that this evening. That's specifically why we're going to have it set up a different way in the future. So tonight, we're going to do 90 minutes.
Just 3 groups. We're just talking about 3 groups.
Okay. Let me go through this. I want to go through this again before we start the public testimony. This is an organization meeting. What you have to say is important. All of us know how difficult it's been, how emotional it's been, and it's tough. I know. It's my hope that these meetings will increase the likelihood of identifying and enduring a solution. We have a strict time limit of 3 hours in this room tonight, which the facilitator pointed out in the beginning, so I just want to make sure that we're all staying parallel in this. Our core goals, our core values, are to be fair and respectful of anyone who is speaking, and I'd like to ask everybody's cooperation in following a couple of things. Please, no booing and no applause. To the extent you're going to do that, it's going to cut the time of other individuals, and I want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak tonight. If the audience cannot show that level of respect, I will close this meeting. If others have already expressed a similar view, speakers may simply indicate that the person prior to you spoke for you, or you may raise your hand and say, you know, as showing an agreement with the person and what they're saying. We'll take that. It's fine. The others, I'm going to finish talking about the ground rules for speaking this evening. Okay, 90 seconds, respect, and we'll move through the agenda, and we'll roll up our sleeves, and we'll get to work. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, may I suggest that by a show of hands, those that are willing to give their time to Upper LA, raise your hand?
We're not.
Could really cut through it.
I hear what you're saying, but I also hear people saying they have waited 2 years to speak. So what I would like to do tonight is give everybody an equal opportunity to have their say. And if we're going to change anything in the future, we can talk about it under new business. But the fair thing for everyone is what was put out earlier, and I think it's fair to keep doing that. So I'm going to ask Amanda to read the names. I think, Amanda, if you read who the current speaker is, then the one on deck. Okay. She's going to give a series of names, and we'll continue to repeat them until we get through everybody who put in a card this evening.
I'm going to read 5 names at a time. If you could please line up behind the podium so we can get through this as swiftly as possible. So we are going to start with Vicki Herman, Christine Kim, Philip Durner, Roy Lyons, and Wendy Morris. Again, for anybody who didn't hear me, that's Vicki Herman, Christine Kim, Phil Durner, Roy Lyons, and Wendy Morris.
Should I start? Or yes?
You may begin.
Thank you. My name is Vicki Herman. I live on Glen Ridge. Sorry.
I think the microphone is adjustable, so you can pull it right towards your face, and it'll be important for
guy? Okay.
That's much better for everyone to be able to hear you.
Thank you. Okay, my name is Vicki Herman. I live on Glen Ridge Drive in Sherman Oaks. Okay, so I'm sorry. I just want to talk about a couple key issues today. One, I'm just going to call the assault is increasing. My health has severely deteriorated, like thousands of others, in the last 14 months with the constant bombardment of planes over our neighborhood. I live in the Santa Monica Mountains, in Sherman Oaks and have lived there for 16 years. I moved there because of peace and quiet, approximately 10 miles from any airport. And there's proof because my assessor's paper says I did not move in a flight path. Many of us live as far away as 15 miles from those airports. I never saw or heard a plane near my home or neighborhood. Then in May of 2018, I woke up to a horror show with between 200 to 225 planes flying extremely low altitudes over my home and my neighbors' rooftops. I literally thought there was a war. We learned quickly that this was the result of FAA Metroplex.
You have 30 seconds.
At first, it was one plane every 5 minutes, then that increased to 2 planes every 5 minutes, later to 3, and now we're seeing 4 planes crushing our homes within the same minute. At the same time, we're talking about helicopters and jets, which are flying out of Van Nuys airports, and those planes are coming in at 2, 3, 4, and 5 o'clock in the morning, including helicopters at 500 feet above my home. I can't tell you.
Thank you.
Wait, I'm just one thing. I just need to show you this.
The next speaker is Christine
Next
Kim.
speaker.
This is 4 planes over my house in 30 seconds. This is what we're living with, 4 planes. So this is just happened recently, and it's been increasing. I'm sure they're going to 5 soon.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Is this what we do when we want to say that happens to me too? We say it now or?
Here, all of us.
Next speaker, please.
Christine Kim.
Hi, I want to play for you some of the assault that we've been experiencing for more than 14 months. This is just a snapshot.
You have 30 seconds.
Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Ms. Kim.
This is in Bel Air. The rest were in Sherman Oaks.
Thank you.
That was 8
Thank you.
planes in 24 minutes over
you.
Stone Canyon.
Thank you.
This is what we're living with. It's inhumane. And I want to ask, I want to ask Lawa, and I want to ask
sorry, Miss-
Lawa and
Miss-
Burbank and the
Your
FAA to
time
call
is
TRACON
up.
tomorrow and inform them of this assault and ask them to go back to the historical path immediately. Nobody should
I'm
live
sorry.
in this situation. You've taken away the livability of our homes. You've subjected us to noise and pollution, and you've increased the fire hazard risks in the Santa Monica Mountains. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to ask you again not to clap or cheer. I'm going to ask you to try and control not to clap or cheer or to boo, because what I'd like to do is let everybody who's up here be sure and hear the speakers that are coming forward and speaking. Who's next?
Next, we have Phil Durner, then Roy Lyons, then Wendy Morris, Terry Lyons, and Sue Ellen Wagner.
Good evening. My name is Phil Durner. I represent the National Business Aviation Association. We represent over 11,000 member organizations and companies across the United States, several hundred of them here in the state of California. Before you folks assume that I'm your enemy, though, we very much applaud the formation of this task force. We very much encourage two-way communication between communities and airports to find solutions that encourage healthy and safe flying. We have found that this type of environment has more often than not created healthy relations for communities and airports to find positive solutions, or at least some common ground for that communication so that the community could be heard. We do hope that there would be some consideration for official representation of users and operators, such as the National Business Aviation Association or other users of these airports as well, outside of federal regulators, which do a wonderful job for safety.
You have 30 seconds.
We would encourage representation among its operators and users at these airfields as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Next, we have Roy Lyons.
Good evening. My name is Roy Lyons, and I appreciate everybody being here tonight, not only the audience, but everybody on the committee to work on this very important project. This is a quality of life issue that affects everybody in the San Fernando Valley. My wife and I moved to Sherman Oaks 32 years ago. We recently retired. We used to love sitting out in our backyard, having a cup of coffee and enjoying the peace and serenity. What Christine Kim just demonstrated is what we're faced in, what we face every morning. We don't go out of our house in the morning anymore. We lock the doors, we close the windows, and we stay inside because we can't hear each other when we talk in the morning. And this goes on throughout the day. It's upsetting. It's affecting our day-to-day point where we're even talking about selling the house and moving out of a community that we've thrived in, we've enjoyed, and we were hoping to relish in our retirement. And now we can't do that because of this terrible noise problem. And nobody in the community is happy about it. It's ridiculous to live this way.
You have 30 seconds.
We have flights coming over throughout the night at all hours from Van Nuys, and we're in Stone Canyon, so we get the jets coming out of Van Nuys Airport right over our house, and when there's a little pause in the morning for Van Nuys, Burbank's coming through. So we have no relief, and sometimes we see both Van Nuys and Burbank coming at the same time, and then of course the helicopters below them, and everybody's compressed on top of each other. It's miserable. You need to fix this. Thank you.
Wendy Morris.
Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Wendy Morris. I'm here today as the president of the Bel Air Hills Association and a member of the Bel Air Beverly Crest Neighborhood Council, which represents over 27,000 residents south of Mulholland, north of Sunset Boulevard, from the 405 to Laurel Canyon on the east. The problem is getting worse every day. Every week we get more and more. It's constant. It's often as far south as the south end of Lower Stone Canyon Reservoir. So these jets and planes are heard all the way to Sunset Boulevard, out of the valley airports. It is shattering the very fabric of our lives. In addition to the noise, we live in constant fear of a major wildfire started by an aviation accident. This very high fire hazard
You have
zone
30 seconds.
of the Santa Monica Mountains is extremely difficult to fight fire. Our roads are narrow and curvy, the hills are very steep. It's devastating to know that we could be destroyed any minute. 32 years in this house, 28 fine, heading into retirement just like the other gentleman. We can't live there anymore. It's over. Our life is gone. 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., just plenty of planes. I have examples of decibel readings, I'll make it super short, that often reach 65. Often.
Next, we have Terry Lyons, then Sue Ellen Wagner, Heidi McKay, Alex Isbicki, and Jeff Rode.
First, I want to say thank you for the FAA as well for attending this meeting and for having such highfalutin people on the panel for this. I appreciate it very much.
Would you state your name again, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Terry Lyons. I live in Sherman Oaks.
Thanks.
So we've lived in the same home for 32 years, but we have never had this volume. It's unprecedented volume of flights. Living in an urban environment, you expect to hear planes and helicopters and ambulance or whatever, but the volume of flights that are now flying, they're stacked over the same flight. So you have the helicopter coming straight up the canyon, and then you have Van Nuys coming this way, and then you have Burbank going that way. And you see them stacked simultaneously. The volume is unprecedented, and living in a canyon, if you were around
You
during
have 30 seconds.
Northridge earthquake, you know that the volume reverberates. So Jean made a comment about the NextGen and having things in their toolbox. Can we add a section in there that includes a compassionate appreciation of how the community is suffering because of what's going on? That would be a great thing to add to that toolbox as well. Thank you.
Sue Ellen Wagner.
Sue Ellen Wagner, co-founder Studio City for Quiet Skies. The purpose of the task force is to provide immediate relief to communities under the departure path. When NextGen was implemented in March 2017, the Burbank departure path was shifted over new communities in the southern San Fernando Valley and Santa Monica Mountains. This is contrary to FAA's own policy of not moving noise over new neighborhoods. The path blazed a trail through Studio City and Sherman Oaks and continued along a narrow and incessant jet superhighway of 200+ jets a day flying at lower altitudes over mountain communities that had previously experienced only occasional jet noise. We had no notice, and even our elected representatives were caught unaware. This path is illegitimate. FAA's proposed procedures, now awaiting environmental study, eventually, only serve to legitimize these devastating changes and to make permanent our public health crisis and collective misery. After 2 years of repeated denials, the FAA finally admitted on July 30th that the path had indeed moved.
You have 30 seconds.
However, FAA claims they do not know how this happened. As rulers of the sky above us, we do not believe this claim. FAA's pattern of denial and delay must stop, and so must the noise. We will not give up until our lives have been restored. To all of our elected representatives out there, you are going to have to work very hard. It's your job to protect us, and we expect you to protect us now. Hard work, a concerted and sustained effort. Use us. We are the experts. Consult with us. We know all about this problem. We have lived with it for 2.5 years. Burbank Airport, thank you for your letters yesterday. That's a tiny step in the right direction. We appreciate the commissioners finally starting to listen to us after a year of attending your meetings. So I want to thank you for that.
Next we have Heidi McKay, Alex Isbicki, Jeff Rode, Anthony Cruz, and Larry Peitzman.
For over 2 years, life has dramatically changed, obviously, in numerous communities. When the FAA was asked to please fix this new problem, the response is, it is FAA policy not to move noise over new areas. Well, I couldn't agree more, because we are the people in the new areas. We live in the new areas that have slime in our pools, fuel residue on our patios, trees, and yards where our children and pets play, whose children play in schoolyards with jets flying as low as 1,500 feet over their heads, who are awakened at 3 a.m. in the morning with freight planes flying just a few thousand feet over our homes. We chose to live in our houses, apartments, and condos 5, 10, 30 years ago with the knowledge that, yes, there is an airport, but it's in Burbank, not Studio City, Sherman Oaks, or Encino, but Burbank. We chose to live in our residences with the facts disclosed to us regarding the 30-plus-year-old historic flight path. 2 years ago, when people first started to complain, the Burbank Airport told us nothing changed, must be imagination. Sure, that can happen. Thousands of people all at once can suddenly imagine planes flying low and often over us. We never noticed that before, but after persistence, a study was done, and guess what? We were right. But they said, oh, we don't know how that happened. Now, the FAA admits there was a change, but they don't know how that happened. They don't know how a new GPS system that was implemented instructing jets to fly at extremely low altitudes in a new, narrow, concentrated flight path that turns over the Santa Monica Mountains, where the echo effect amplifies every jet threefold.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alex Isbicki. Thank you for listening and hearing us today. I
don't have quite an organized statement like that, but I do agree and I concur with what's been stated so far. What I do want to mention is that we have a current public crisis, health crisis going on in our neighborhoods that have been implemented overnight, basically. It's getting worse. Every single day it gets worse. The volume of airplanes has increased. The hours on which they're flying has broadened. And there's literally no stop of noise throughout the day or the night, 7 days a week, including Sundays when we want to take a rest from a hard weeks of work. So what I'm asking is that today we consider an injunction to stop the madness and the misery.
You have 30 seconds.
Stop what I believe is to be a public health crisis with particulates falling into our homes. We're wiping our sills with black soot now, oil everywhere. We don't even know what ultra fine particulates do to us because they're a 1,000th of the thinness of a hair that permeates our lungs. We don't know. Put an injunction in now to review what we're going to do with these new flight paths. But we need help now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 3 minutes into 90 seconds.
Can you give me your name, please?
My name is Jeff Rode. I live south of Mulholland, Beverly Glen and Mulholland area, south of Mulholland. So I'm wondering what it was like in the meeting that you guys had at the FAA. So you're all in the room, right? And you go, so guys, let's get going on NextGen for Van Nuys and Burbank airports. So we've got to keep in mind two things, safety and saving lots of fuel for the airlines. So we want to fly the planes nice and low as long as we can and have them climb really, really slowly to save fuel, and let's use as much space as we can so we can keep them really far away from each other for safety. So we have these two airports over here, and all this space south of the airport in the San Fernando Valley, about 6 to 10 miles, and then a huge mountain range, the Santa Monica Mountains. Now these areas never had planes over them before, but we got to do this NextGen thing, and that area looks perfect for us, right, Raquel? It's this big, wide swath of communities in the San Fernando Valley and south of the airports, and then a huge mountain range even further south. We'll take the area from the 405 on the west, Laurel Canyon on the east, and we'll direct all the departures over that one area. We can have Van Nuys get them going this way, Burbank getting them the other way, and we're not going to have the planes go up because it uses too much fuel. We're going to have them stay super, super low, and so they can go into distant areas and can actually function as the takeoff tarmac for the departure for both airports. And then a little voice from the back of the room goes, but sir, those valley communities in Santa Monica Mountains are south of the airports, and the planes are going north.
Thank you.
That's okay. We can make a huge turn over those communities and then head north. But sir, those communities are filled with people, homes, schools, parks, and nature preserves, and the planes will be flying low, 2,000, 3,000, 4 feet up. That's okay. The FAA, we can do it. We own the air, not the people.
Mr. Rode.
I want to make a complaint.
Mr. Rode.
You said you didn't know about what was going on. 150 to 250 airliners over the Santa Monica Mountains.
Mr. Rode,
I hear you saying
I'm going to ask you to step aside or I will have you escorted out. Thank you.
Next, we have Anthony Cruz, Larry Peitzman, Kim Biddle, David Gaines, and Gilbert Galvin.
My name is Anthony Cruz. I want to thank the committee for allowing me the opportunity to voice our comment on behalf of the Mid-Valley Family YMCA. We know that flight patterns will never please everybody, but we also want to make sure that the positive impact of airports are not lost. We are pleased that the FAA, elected officers, and the airport are committed to working together to find a reasonable solution. The Mid-Valley Family YMCA partners closely with the Van Nuys Airport, and it seems the impact that the airport provides to the community, the Aviation Career Day that brings over 14,000 students from across the San Fernando Valley to tour and meet with experts in aviation and aerospace industries, to the 10,000 jobs that are associated with the airport. Van Nuys Airport has been a fixture in our community since 1928 and is more than a business. They are truly a community partner to the Mid-Valley Family YMCA. Thank you, committee members.
Larry Peitzman.
Yes, my name is Larry Peitzman. I'm not a representative of anybody. I live in Studio City, and this is what I want to say. I respectfully urge the elected representatives who are here to fix this problem. It's your job. And if you can't fix this problem, then I respectfully urge everybody else in this room to find elected representatives who can. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim Biddle with Upper LA. I was thrilled to read the FAA's policy of not shifting noise from one community to another reiterated in the first paragraph of this task force bylaws. It should make your job much easier because both the FAA and Burbank have admitted the flight path has shifted more than 1 nautical mile south over our community. Coincidentally, at the exact same time, SoCal Metroplex was implemented out of Burbank, with no warning, no notice, no compassion, and still to this day, no accountability. As the FAA policy was clearly violated and our community subjected to the devastation of a brand new next-gen path, we expect you to correct this violation. In fact, Upper LA has an email from Mark Hardiman recounting a conversation with FAA officials from June 2018 that reads as follows. At this point, FAA is interested and willing to participate with Landrum and Brown in the final public meeting. This could be an ideal place for them to dovetail into the work that Landrum and Brown has done and should be a message that is very well received by the Studio City residents. In particular, as FAA confirmed that the intent of the new procedure is to pull flight tracks back over the 101 and 405 freeways as they make their turns. That phrase, full flight tracks back, shows the FAA knew the path moved over a new community, our community. We just received word that the Government Accountability Office has agreed to conduct an audit of the FAA, its noise measurement standards, and most importantly, its conduct in relation to the many communities it is devastated by the implementation of NextGen. We invite the GAO to examine the FAA's interactions here, including this task force, as a microcosm of the FAA's response to community concerns. The investigator should see real time how the FAA responds, or should I say fails to respond, not just to community members and community groups, but city, state, and federal officials. I'm just going to finish this. The FAA is in charge of national airspace. If you and that entity cannot figure out how to fix 2 departures at one airport, moving them back 1 nautical mile in short order, then there should be another investigation by the GAO into the FAA's ability to fulfill their mandate.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we have David Gaines, Gilbert Galvin, Dean Tomlinson, Nancy Friedman, and Kifeng Zhu.
Hi there, my name is David Gaines. I grew up in Burbank, and Can you hear me now?
Yeah, just speak right into it.
My name is David Gaines. I grew up in Burbank, and I've lived in Studio City since 1975. When I moved to Studio City, planes from Burbank Airport used to take off south and east, as well as over Studio City. And sometime in the 80s, there was some kind of a scare about an accident that might have occurred, and we were told that planes could no longer, from Burbank, could no longer take off because they were interfering with the LAX flight path. But now that we have this new navigation, GPS navigation out there, it seems like we could maybe look at this again and see, I mean, what we want is a fair distribution of this noise. And I mean, it got worse in the late 80s and 90s. It's gotten terrible lately. What we really need to do is explore the other options for which direction planes can fly out of Burbank Airport. I'd really like you to do that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Gilbert Galvin.
My name is Gilbert Galvan, and I live in Studio City in the Studio Village complex since 1975. This year, I've been retired for several years, and now I cannot really enjoy going outside in the pool because almost every 10 minutes there's a flight right over the swimming pool. And I'm getting tired of that, and I just don't like to be indoors most of the time. And at night it's very, very noisy also from the Van Nuys Airport. Thank you very much.
Dean Tomlinson. Dean Tomlinson. Okay, we'll move on to Nancy Friedman, and then Kifeng Zhu, Matthew Yedlin, Bill Cochran, and Kim Selfin.
Good evening. When I bought my NoHo townhome 17 years ago, I didn't realize I was in the Burbank airport flight path. However, there weren't that many takeoffs flying over my area back then, and I got used to the occasional noise in a short amount of time. Fast forward to the last year or two, and more specifically the last 6 months or so, I started noticing that there was a huge increase in the number of departures, and the worst part was that they were flying directly over my townhome. In fact, if the pilot could open his or her window and stick his or her head out, I could tell you what color their hair is. I live less than 3 miles from Burbank Airport. Planes have to take off and land, I understand that. And as I previously mentioned, I got used to the occasional takeoffs shortly after I bought. But now, the concentrated barrage of departures over a narrow path is intolerable. I have to put earplugs in just about every morning so that when 7 a.m. arrives and the planes start up, I can at least dull the noise. It's driving me friggin' insane. Then I found out about NextGen and how it has changed flight patterns. A horrible plan, to say the least. Not only is it polluting our communities and dropping who knows what from the exhaust, I believe it breaches a covenant that says the right of an occupant of real property, particularly of a residence, to enjoy and use premises in peace and without interference. Well, NextGen is indeed an interference. It is just plain unfair to those of us who have become victims of this terribly unhealthy and ill-conceived plan. The flights need to return to the previous flight patterns, ascend the planes faster, and turn them over sooner over natural noise corridors. Therefore, I am requesting, actually, even though I dislike the word demand, I am demanding a fair solution be implemented immediately to halt the deafening roar and toxic pollution that is destroying our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Yifang Zhu. I'm a professor of environmental health sciences at UCLA Fielding School of Public Health, where I also serve as associate dean for academic programs. My research focuses on air pollution, exposure assessment, and related health effects. I have published about 100 papers in those fields on those topics, including one of the studies conducted at LAX looking at aircraft emissions. So I just want to thank the task force for the opportunity to share with you some of the information that I have based on my academic backgrounds. I want to share that there is compelling scientific evidence in the literature about the health impacts of aviation-related activities. Increased noise around airports has been linked to increased hospitalization for cardiovascular diseases. I know our topic today is around noise, but I also want to let you know aircraft also emit huge amount of ultrafine particles. The particles that gentleman referred to, they are extremely tiny. They're less than 1% of our hair size. They can penetrate through biological boundaries, get into our heart, cause cardiovascular impacts. I really want to urge this task force to think about the public health, think about the community health, think about the residents who live in the airport neighborhoods and get impacted by the noise and those tiny particles. Thank you.
Matthew Yedlin.
Hi, I'm Matthew Yedlin. I live at Studio Village near Colfax and Moore Park in the Flats. We get virtually every departure from Burbank. So if they fly 150 to 200, we get all of them directly overhead. And then they move on, disperse a little bit into the hills or other areas in the flats. And I could tell you that that pre-NextGen graph that was shown here is fabricated. I don't know who put it together. It might be the FAA. But that red area shows prior to 2017 going right over my area. We never had it anywhere close to this. Now, some solutions, it's very simple. All of you here, you have mayors, other powerful people. You can show some good intention by having 10% of the flights just go east. They're headed there anyway. You could have another 40 or 50% go north. You do that when the weather is different.
You have 30 seconds.
So you could go north easily, you could do east. Then have 50% of the flights go all the way up to about 2 miles north of the 101 freeway, spread it out southwest and all the way up to 2 miles north of the freeway. You can do that. You're so powerful. You just have one person here from the FAA. Are you telling me with all your influence and power, you can't persuade one person?
Thank you.
I know you're committed to doing it, so I'd appreciate it if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Yevlin. Thank you. Bill Kokorin, Kim Selfen, Pat Garner, William Vaught, and then Elizabeth Gindros.
I'm Bill Corcoran. I live in Southwest Valley Glen in Councilman Krikorian's district. I bought the house in 2015, never thought I'd be able to afford a house in Los Angeles. And in the last year, learning about all this change, I've just had a severe degradation of quality of life. I have to close my door to have calls. I have to mute my computer when I'm doing a video hangout because people can't hear me and I have to explain what the hell's going on. It's deeply upsetting. And so I won't repeat all the recommendations folks have made here, but I will say to you, Madam Chairwoman, in setting the tone and how to run these meetings, that this is a community problem that deserves community-defined solutions, and that I hope you'll see yourself not as a decision maker, but as someone who's taking this information in, and that this panel at large will be looking to the community for the solutions it needs to return to the quality of life that we had. And I also would like to have a more forthcoming conversation about how NextGen figures—
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. How NextGen figures into revenue projections and growth for these airports. I am, with every fiber of my body, going to fight any expansion of any kind in these airports so long as this model is in place. Thank you.
Kim Selfen.
Hello, I'm Kim Salfan. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm here to speak for everybody that's not here. I live in North Hollywood by Burbank and Colfax, and our quality of life has greatly improved by the change in the airport path. We live along the 170 freeway, and we're greatly impacted by freeway noise and freeway particulates. And now that the flight path has changed, we have much less noise from the planes, and we have less noise or pollution, as everyone has said. I don't know from whether or not, but it has changed our neighborhood for the better, and many people that are low income live in our neighborhood, and they are not here to speak, so I am here to speak for them. And I hope that you will think about all your constituents and how everybody's lives has impacted. I see people here who have great impact in their life. We've had impact too for the better, and how to make it equal for everybody. I know there's suggestions of having—
30 seconds.
Thank you. The airplane fly over natural noise corridors. Those are freeways. And there's already a lot of pollution around the freeways, and there's a lot of people that live right next to those freeways, including schools. So please take that into consideration, and the people that aren't here speaking and not as loud when you look at these items on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pat Garner.
If you make a choice to live there, it's
Next speaker, please.
Pat Garner.
Next speaker, please.
Okay, we're going to move on to William Vaught.
Great, thank you. William Vaught.
Hello, I'm William Vaught. I live in Studio City. Thank you all for your service, your public service. My children attend Carpenter Community Charter. As my home is less than 1/4 mile walking distance from Carpenter, I can confirm that at least 1,000 children's quality of life and likely health is being destroyed. Councilman Krikorian, our children have shared classrooms in our community and therefore share the risks. I know you know that. I could not be more proud of your representation here tonight, considering the weight of community interest and commitment and comment. Please keep it up. Do not stop. Please continue to lead. You are in the right place at the right time. Thank you.
That's nice. Next speaker, please.
Elizabeth Gindros, John Altschuler, Dr. Joelle Bernberg, Lynn Rembert, and Stephanie Westcott.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Gindros, and I'd like to address the FAA representatives. Our quality of life has been destroyed. The noise and environmental effects are devastating. Over 200 low-flying commercial jets, business jets, general aviation, and helicopters, nonstop, day and night. No relief. This is ruining Studio City, our sanity, our health, our lives. Altitude needs to be higher. And the red line of hell, as I call it, needs to be dispersed. Please help us.
Hi, John Altschuler. I live in Studio City. Basically, this is what's happened with me. I called Feinstein's office and I was told it's a local issue, it's an FAA issue, okay? I called Paul Krikorian's office and I was told, well, if you couldn't get anywhere with the federal, with your senator, what do you think we can do? Which I thought was a really terrible answer to the question. I said, well, why don't you tell Paul that he knows these congressmen and maybe there can be some pressure. So all I've gotten is somebody saying the FAA is this black box that can't be done with. I've been bounced to every situation. It's very, very frustrating. So what I'm curious about is there something that can be done? So the last question that I've had is that what I've been told, and maybe somebody can tell me this later, is that the way the authority was set up, that these people don't want the planes going east, and so the planes will always go west. And it seems to me that's an FAA issue, and it's what they've said, disperse the misery a little bit. But all we can do is elect different people, and that this is Brad Sherman's office and your office if you're not going to do anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Dr. Joelle Bernberg. I'm a family practice physician, and I'm also a mother of two, soon to be three. And I represent a lot of my neighbors who are mothers who cannot come because they're watching our kids right now. I moved here to be near my family. I grew up in Sherman Oaks, and I came home and I was very concerned with the air quality in Los Angeles and making that decision, so I purposefully made a choice to not move my family near the freeway and to try and elevate us. But basically what I think one of my colleagues was trying to express is that cancer is caused by concentrating a chemical that can cause cancer into a person over time or in a heavy concentration. So by taking a diffuse area and concentrating it over certain people, you create a cancer-causing environment, in addition to many other diseases like heart disease, asthma, and lung disease, in addition to many that we can't prove because it takes about 40 years or more to prove cancer. So by creating a concentrated area, it has created a dumping site that is toxic on top of a certain community. And it is condemning a lot of us to death, for lack of a better way to say it. And so it might be me, it might be my kids, it might be my neighbor's kids, but some of us will die because of the concentration of what was once diffuse into a small area. And so I think it should be returned to something diffuse that would be less cancer-causing and less disease-causing to the entire community. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lynn Rembert. I'm a 23-year resident of what I used to call Toluca Lake, now referred to as runway 15/33 T6885. In June 17 of this year and July 19th, the Burbank Airport sent letters to the FAA about these issues. August 16th, the FAA replied to the Burbank Airport saying that the flight procedures remain the same as the past that were existing prior to the Southern California Metroplex. It's the same, according to them. They also say that the FAA is not responsible for the frequency of flights, that's up to the owner-operators of the aircraft and the airlines. The controllers also should handle the frequency. It's not up to the FAA. So if the controllers can talk with the operators and the airlines, we can settle this whole thing. They can go back to what it was, and we don't even have to be here.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. We need to get better communications between the FAA, us, and everything that's going on. They changed this whole flight path without input, so we can change it back the same way. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Stephanie Westcott. I've been a resident of Burbank for 20 years now. When I finally decided to make it permanent and buy a house, I was concerned because I could only afford houses within the flight path, because when you put a plane over a house, you greatly decrease the value of the home. So think of that as spread out through all of these people right now. But I waited. I got lucky on someone else's foreclosure, not in the flight path. I am southeast of the Burbank Airport in Magnolia Park, free and clear for 5 years. Wonderful suburbs, quiet. And then in 2017, I saw a plane, one plane, and then I saw 2 planes, and then I saw 3 planes, and now I have 15 to 20 planes that I see and hear throughout the entire day. So it is over a new area, but it's not, because if you look at these pretty maps they show you, it's all the same colors in the same spots, because nobody's accounting for elevation. No one's accounting for the altitudes of the planes and how fast they used to be taking off, so I wouldn't see any of the planes. Now, when you go down the Chandler bike path that was made so nice, not a railroad track anymore, there are planes roaring over kids playing now. This isn't the Burbank that I wanted to make my home in anymore. And all we need to do is look at the elevation and put up noise monitors if you really want to. Spend the money. Put up noise monitors all over Studio City. Find out where the noise is, because it's in all the places that are not on your current noise contour map. But I really hope you guys find the solution, because I really used to love this town.
Thank you.
Sherry Elkame.
Hi, I'm Sherry Elkame. I'm a 25-year resident of Studio City. And with all respect to the chairperson and the committee, it might be inconvenient for you to sit through 5 hours or more of our testimony, but we're living with this problem day in or day out. And among us, we've collectively spent countless hours at these meetings waiting to be heard, and we spent 45 minutes tonight sitting patiently while you decided what night of the week to meet and who was going to be in charge, and reading off of slides that we could have read ourselves. Our communities don't profit from this airport, and yet we suffer the negative impacts. Whenever I look at the slide for NextGen, safety is always listed as the first criteria, the first goal, but safety starts from the ground up. There are robust studies showing the negative impact between airport noise and cardiovascular health. We're biologically programmed to go into fight or flight when we hear noise that approaches. So during the day, we can talk ourselves into taking a deep breath, but when we're woken up from our sleep, which we all are on a regular basis, our bodies are in fight or flight. So that is, it's very bad for our cardiovascular health, not to mention the air pollution. One of we have to have community involvement in this task force. You really can't appreciate the impact unless you're living right underneath it. And I saw on one of the slides that you were going to evaluate community proposed solutions. I'm a speech therapist. I'm not the FAA. I'm not a pilot. I think you guys have to come up with the solutions, and so we can evaluate them to see if they work for our community.
Thank you.
Cindy Essen.
Thank you very much to the task force for appearing here tonight. My name is Cindy Eason. I live in Glen Ridge Drive in Sherman Oaks in the hills. I live 10 miles from Burbank Airport and 8 miles from Van Nuys, but my neighborhood is in the crosshairs of this problem. We have suffered with hundreds of planes over our homes every day. I have 3 points to make. Number one, we should return to the pre-Metroplex flight plans immediately. There is no reason for delay. I'd like to know why there is no resident on this task force. Why is there no representation on this task force? of people who are suffering with this devastation every day. Number three, I expect you all to act in the sunshine and act fairly with transparency as we expect of our government representatives. I'm a government employee, and I can assure you that we would never act with the callousness that we've seen from the FAA, and it's an embarrassment that they are a federal agency.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Many of the things that I wanted to say have been said, so I'm going to focus on specific issues that I would like to address to the FAA and the members. The FAA computer noise level models show the planes at a certain altitude when they reach our neighborhood. I live in Studio City. Since our neighborhood is at a higher elevation than the airport, which is at sea level, the noise level studies from the FAA 2018 draft environmental review data did not include the correlation of the topography or actual altitude components, so the computer models for both noise levels and air pollutants and environmental impact need further analysis to reflect the significantly lower flight altitudes when the flight reaches our neighborhoods and fly over sensitive forest and wildlife areas, who also cannot be here to speak this evening, to be utilized by the two proposed flight path fixes, JT and Tegan. These areas, including our neighborhoods, are part of CAL FIRE's designated high fire severity zones. The accumulation of engine fuel emissions residue on the native forests and dry chaparral landscape below could be adding fuel to a potentially catastrophic wind-blown fire event. Thank you. Especially during the Santa Ana season. I'd like to ask the members of the task force to take another look at the draft environmental report and reconsider the categories they've stated were considered to have negligible or non-existent effects from the proposed actions. I would also like to ask the members to take another look at option 2 of the alternatives eliminated from consideration on page 11 of the draft environmental review regarding shifting the Tegan waypoint north to follow Highway 101. Would it not be possible to shift the final approach to the airport on runway 8 further north as well to possibly accommodate this shift? Thank you.
My name is Wayne Williams. I'm a member of the Board of Airport.
Let me call the others so we can move
Yep.
along. Then we have Cindy Bloom, Randy Dodge, Stacy Schlichter, Jack Server, and James Rhodes. You may begin. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Wayne Williams. I'm a member of the Van Nuys Airport Citizens Advisory Council, and I represent Councilmember Paul Koretz on that council. I thank our council members for being here and our congressmen's representatives. And I want you all to know that I've been a resident of Sherman Oaks around 405 and the 101 for 35 years. I was very much involved in getting rid of the Stage 2 jets that plagued this valley for a tremendous period of time. It took 25 years to do that. That is completely and totally unreasonable. And the FAA needs to recognize that they have really made a big mistake. They need to go back immediately to the pre-2017 routes tomorrow morning. Additionally, any reports put out by the FAA need to show gates which show the elevation at which these aircraft are flying. They need to be very clear in the fact that these planes are flying lower over mountains that never experienced this aircraft before. I count on each and every one of you to recognize that these people are paying your bill. They own you. You represent them at their will. Please act accordingly and get these planes back to where they were before. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Cindy Bloom from Shadow Hills Property Owners Association. And I don't mean to bash Burbank, but here I go. So what do these communities have in common? Latuna Canyon, Sun Valley, Shadow Hills, Sherman Oaks, Studio City, Valley Village, Sylmar, Lakeview Terrace, Cagle Canyon. The answer is they are not Burbank. The irony here is that Burbank is the least impacted city of all of us, yet Burbank makes millions of dollars per year in revenue generated by the airport, and these include sales tax, utility users tax, transient occupancy tax, the transient parking tax, and business taxes. And you may ask, well, how do I know that? Well, I get a pension check every month from the city of Burbank because I used to work for the city of Burbank, and I love the city of Burbank. So, but the facts are the facts. And I never understood how Glendale and Pasadena became part of the authority because they have no of the negative impacts that the other surrounding communities have. And just listening to people talking and seeing the flight paths and what have you, it just seems to me that maybe, just maybe, NextGen is not a good idea. Maybe it is not working. Maybe it is the Edsel of the FAA computer applications.
Thank you, Cindy.
So, anyways, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Got it. Thank you.
Andy Dodge.
Randy Dodge. I was born here in Los Angeles. Can you hear me?
They can't hear you. Just talk close to the mic.
Hi, I was born here in Los Angeles. I bought a house in Northridge, and I only lasted there about 6 months because of all the noise from the Van Nuys Airport. So what I did is I saved my money. I worked very, very hard to buy a house in the hills, which is where I live now. The reason that everybody lives in the hills is because we want to be away from the pollution. That's why we all bought there. We all worked very, very hard, spending our whole life to get up there. Now what you've done is by changing the flight pattern over us, not only are you endangering our lives with all the pollution, but think about what you're doing to all the animals, which they can't come here and talk in front of you, but that's what you're affecting them also. The other lady commented that, oh, they've been relieved of it by not flying over the freeway. That's what the freeways are for. They already have the pollution. That's where the plane should be flying over. And I don't know how the feeling I get is there is money behind this for some reason. I'm not sure where, but it's always money. And either the airlines are making more money, or Burbank's making more money, or the FAA is making more money, but that's what's at the bottom of this.
Thank you. For our next 5 speakers, please.
Jack Serber, James Rhodes, Kelly Decker, and Lyndon Croner.
Hi. Madam Chairperson, I wanted to bring something up right at the start. You stated you wanted to be respectful and to follow the rules. Your comment that, does anybody want to turn your speaker cards? I don't think that's very respectful. Don't think that that's very respectful to the thousands of people who suffer. Your snicker after the comment, I also find that a little bit disrespectful. 4 of the 8 voting members in this task force have had years to fix this and have basically done nothing because their municipalities have financial stakes in the airport. I will get into this at a future time when I have more time, but one is your municipal bonds and your interest, and like the other speaker had said, taxes, millions of dollars in taxes. I want to move on to Measure B, which was the Burbank measure for the airport expansion or renovation. And I want to quote the spokesperson from that campaign. Yes on Measure B campaign spokesperson Linda Walmsley said, the new terminal would be bigger and more convenient and farther from the landing jets. The number of gates would remain the same and the old terminal would be demolished. They're not adding more flights, and the flight path is not going to change either. And now I ask you one more thing. LAUSD has reached out to the FAA. Thousands of kids, staff, teachers, and administrators are impacted. They have heard crickets from you and the FAA. But one complaint from a Burbank parent of a Burbank school child, Mr. Miller, directly responds, yes, you have your preferences to who you cater to within your walls. The proof is astounding. This is your time to be fair. FAI.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jackie Serber. I'm a resident of Sherman Oaks. I've lived there since 2012 when I bought my home. We bought our home there because it was quiet. That's why we bought our home there. I just think that if this isn't about making somebody more money, here's an idea. Make the airlines, make the airports cooperative models, then measure the noise of all the people who suffer and distribute the profits evenly amongst all the people who suffer. Also, we cannot wait 18 months like the FAA proposed at the last meeting for another study. No, we want it stopped now, then you can do your study, then we can talk about a new flight plan.
Thank you.
Why are we all here? We want freedom and environmental justice for all. Our generation will not stand for this. I'm going to be here for probably at least another 70 years, and I'm going to stay involved and hold all of you accountable. And if it means I have to run for District 4, I will do it, because I want to see change. Even when we want to leave our homes, just to get some peace and quiet, go for a hike at one of our favorite trails, we're just surrounded by planes. We can't even get a break. So I invite all of you, come have a 24-hour sleepover at my house. Try and get your work done from there, where you can, the last thing you hear before you fall asleep is a plane. It wakes you up in the middle of the night, and it's the first thing that you hear in the morning. And think about all the bats who travel by sonic waves. They're the ones that eat our mosquitoes. Where are they right now?
Thank you.
Hello, my name's James Rhodes. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Most of it's already pretty much been said. I don't want to repeat a whole lot of stuff. Shadow Hills and Cagle Canyon. Shadow Hills, I feel the actual house shake from the report on blast off or takeoff from Burbank. It actually shakes the windows and rumbles the bed in the house. Cagle Canyon, on flights incoming, we now have homeowners that are complaining that they actually can read and see people's faces in the windows of planes that are coming in. So that it's not just on the takeoff. There's also problems with the flight plan on incoming flights. Also, it has shifted over a small community of about 300 homes, and it's torturing them. And it could be moved over just a little bit and be going over the landfill instead of directly over the homes. I'm done. I'll relinquish. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Decker. I'm the president of the Cagle Canyon Civic Association. We are a community of unincorporated homes in the Angeles National Forest, and we are also experiencing, as James just described, all of the impacts that everyone else has so eloquently put forth toward you tonight. Unfortunately, I do not have a statement on behalf of my community to share with you this evening because we were not informed that this meeting was taking place, either by our elected representatives or by the airport or to anyone whom we've made our concerns known over the last 6 months. So outreach, I think, is an issue that you need to take into account. So without an official position voted on by my community, all that I can say is that I would urge the members of this task force to please work toward a solution that is fair to everyone who's suffering under these conditions and not just fair to the groups that have the largest population. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Linda Kroner. My husband and I bought a house in Sherman Oaks Hills 10 years ago. I grew up next to the Hollywood Freeway. I grew up here. And that wasn't fun. So we work all our life to buy a nice house in the hills where it's nice and quiet, because I've never even been able to sleep on a first floor apartment because the noise bothers me. Now we have, and I have my air noise button, it's every 1 to 3 minutes, 17 hours a day, 300 flights over our residential neighborhood. I'm the kind of person that I walk 1.5 miles every day in the neighborhood with my earbuds in. I crank it up. I still can't hear it, and I look up, and there's a jet, and I can see the wheels right over me. And Sherman Oaks Elementary is right down the street. And I enjoy swimming every day. Now I don't. I'm locking myself in my house, turning on the AC, which I don't even like, can't even open my doors at night to cool off, and it's disrupting my health. I've now seen a cardiac surgeon, I've seen endocrinologist, I've never had health problems like this. I'm physically fit, 56 years old, and this is making me shake day and night. And it's not reasonable. Please do something about it. You're pummeling us with layers and layers. We have jets from Van Nuys, Burbank, we're right in the crux of it. And now we have helicopters on top of it, which are nothing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just consider if this was your family, your sons or daughters living in this neighborhood, what would you do? Thank you.
My name is Joanna Drury, and I live in Encino near the reservoir. And we're having the same problem the folks in Sherman Oaks and Studio City are having. I grew up near Montreal International Airport. Walking distance, I had my first summer job in the bookstore there. We heard planes, nothing like what I'm hearing today, but we heard planes, and it didn't bother us because we bought near an airport, Dorval Airport. In fact, we'd see the planes, oh, there's KLM, and it didn't bother us. It's very different when you buy in a neighborhood because it's quiet. It's more expensive, it's quiet, and for 28 years, it was perfect in my house near the reservoir. Now I'm like all the other people who've been talking who don't go outside. Our favorite activity is reading the LA Times on a Sunday morning in the backyard. We don't do that anymore. And I also feel that the flight path should be changed to where it was before. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Peter Basinski. I live in Sherman Oaks. I'm halfway between both airports. I'm in the foothills. I hope that you will all consider that these people are the experts. We are the experts. We know what happened. The FAA doesn't seem to know what happened. NextGen is what happened. That's why we're here. So let's talk about what NextGen's about. It's about commerce. Get more planes in the air, save gas for the airlines. And do we need to modernize the airspace? Probably, yeah. And the GPS is probably a good tool. No plan is perfect on the first try. So let's fix it. Let's be smart and let's fix it quickly, and it's easy to do. Now, I don't see any representation here from Air Traffic Control or the Pilots Association. If I'm wrong, please correct me, but these guys are the front lines, and they certainly could provide some valuable information on what these fixes what can be done immediately. So when NextGen was created, you either forgot the effect of these narrow and lower flight paths are having on the people who live beneath them, or you just didn't care. The Burbank Airport Commissioners were warned July 19th in 2015 in their meeting about exactly what would happen. And they were offered the chance to tell the FAA, we need dispersal headings. They chose to do nothing. And that's where we are today. They've done nothing, and now it's your time. It's your time to do something, and we expect it to get done, and we expect it to get done quickly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you all for being here and speaking with us. Everything's been said that I was going to say. I'm very concerned about my health. That's the #1 issue. I'm now taking Xanax. I'm seeing a cardiologist for heart palpitations from stress. They're right about the flight or fight response while you're sleeping. It's an insidious thing. It actually, living underneath a flight path, actually changes the physical structure of the left ventricle of your heart. And I happen to have supraventricular tachycardia. So this is a constant fear for me. That's not fair. I didn't buy into this. I didn't buy a house near the airport. If I had, I wouldn't be standing here. But you imposed this on us with no warning, with no thought or care or consideration as to what it would do to us. It's not just about the loss of our lives as we once knew them. We can't go out in our backyards. We can't save electricity because we have to use our air conditioning 24/7 because we can't open our doors and windows. We're asking you to deal fairly with the people that you've impacted and stop acting like we're the evil here, that we're bothering you, that we get our 90 seconds of time. You bothered us You came into our backyards and destroyed our way of life. We'd like that back. And I really, just one other thing, don't understand how the FAA has the right to take away my ability to live a healthy life by poisoning me with a plane every 3 minutes from 5:45 in the morning until 1 a.m. I can't sleep. You know how important sleep is to good health. And the toxins. I don't understand how you have the right to take away
Thank you, Ms.
my
Ashley.
right to live a healthy life. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sherry Lins, Eric Robinson, Jane Go, and Carlos Torres.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here and everybody else. So first I'd like to say we pay a lot of taxes. Yes, we do. Okay, that being said, I worked really hard at a great career for 40 years. I retired last year. Traveled a lot for my work. I bought my house in Studio City, south of Ventura Boulevard, really nice house, 42 years ago. 32 years ago, sorry. So right before I retired, about 5 years before, I decided to renovate my house. I put in 5 skylights to let more air in and enjoy it. Renovated my entire house, tore it to the studs. That's right. I retired last year. I can't go sit on my patio with my friends and myself. Am I angry? Yes, I'm angry. I can't sit on my patio with my friends and have a glass of wine because of the noise. It's deafening, and it starts in the morning. It doesn't stop till I go to bed. It's horrifying. And there's no, I can't, let me tell you, if I did my job like all of you do your job, I never would have worked. And that's the truth. I wouldn't have been hired, and I would have never worked, because you're not doing your jobs.
Thank you.
Sherry Mins. Eric Robinson.
Hey there, thank you all for being here. I appreciate you guys listening to us, especially Councilman Krikorian. I've lived in Studio City for 12 years. I enjoyed 10 years of complete bliss. 7 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a home there. For the first 5 years, it was my Valhalla. It was my happiest place. I could open my windows and feel this wonderful breeze. I live in a canyon. 2 years ago, everything changed. Now my house is my personal hell. I chose 4 years ago to work at home, to be a present father, and to be able to be around my kids, and created a home office. Now, I cannot work from home. I sit at home with noise-canceling headphones on all day in a state of misery. These planes are destroying our quality of life, our ability to speak, our ability to work from home. There is a high concentration of people in the Studio City Sherman Oaks neighborhood who are either retired or work from home and have kids. You are impacting a very high density group of people who are at their homes all day long. The other issue I wanted to talk about is one of the greatest resources of our neighborhood is the Fryman Canyon Park. This is something that people from Sherman Oaks, Studio City, Burbank, North Hollywood, and all over come to hike in, and it is one of the greatest escapes from the noise of Los Angeles. That hike is now destroyed because there are planes going directly over that park every 2 to 3 minutes, low and loud. Please do something. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jane Go. I live in Studio City for 26 years. You've heard plenty of anguish. There's plenty more to be shared about the FAA. Theoretically, the mandate is safety, and from the very inception, it was really invented to promote commerce. So it's kind of a house divided. So there's been a lot of controversy with Congress from the very beginning, a lot of efforts to shut NextGen down because it was taking too long, it was running over budget. A lot of people think that what happened with the flight pass with NextGen was some kind of nefarious thing. I personally think it's just incompetence. So, and it's not even deliberate. I think there's just too many fingers in the pie. So things happen, and then things get put into place, and nobody has the energy to fix them. So you know what to do. The Burbank Airport's highest revenue and traffic was in 2008, 20% more than now. And Frank Miller said that there were no complaints like this. And why was that? Because the flight paths were more equitable and functional. So you have already a long history that you could return to. It's not a mystery. It could be done quickly and easily. So I ask you to go back to what worked.
Thank you.
Geraldine Simon, Joe Capoletti, Lyson Franks, and Frank Nishimaka.
Good evening, Madam Chair, task force members. My name is Carlos Torres. I am the Director of Environmental Health and Safety with Los Angeles Unified School District, and I'm here to advocate for our students. It is my mandate to protect the health and safety of our students, staff, and school community, and to maintain the integrity of the learning environment. That's my one goal in life, and to raise my kids all right. 2, we are concerned with the potential noise and air quality impacts that the new flight paths may have on our students and staff and schools. The district wants a role in this process, and we respectfully request that LAUSD be provided a place of some sort on the task force, because we do represent so many students. It's our understanding that the 2 departure routes at Burbank Airport are being revised and will be evaluated in environmental assessment. And we plan on reviewing the environmental assessment when it's released. And we're hoping to have more than just that type of role. Again, I'd like to ask respectfully if we could, if there's a way for LAUSD to be a part of the task force. I appreciate all your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Geraldine Simon. I live in Studio City. Before 2017, there was no real air noise over my home. I live in just above Ventura, beautiful, quiet. I'm like a lot of other people, found a place that I just absolutely love. Now, due to the shift in the Burbank flight path, I have hundreds of planes flying over my home at extremely low altitudes every single day. It's horrible. I ask you to imagine if it was your home. One of the things that no one has brought up is the number of complaints that have been filed. Thank God for Air Noise. The app Air Noise started registering complaints in March of 2018. There are over 1 million complaints have been filed in Air Noise about this. That's 1 year and 4 months, let alone the people using WebTrack. I'm urging the board to do the following things. The planes should ascend at a faster rate. They should return to the historical flight path, which both the FAA and Burbank admit has shifted south over our community. The planes should turn sooner and over natural noise corridors. I want to thank the task force for listening to the community.
Thank you.
Joe Capoletti. Joe Capoletti.
Thanks very much for this opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Joe Capoletti. I am the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council business rep for Area 4. I was in a similar meeting to this about a month ago at the Burbank Airport, and at that time I marveled at the fact that I was in a meeting room at the airport and it was actually quieter there than it was at my house. I thought that was amazing. And this is interesting because I have a home office as well as the gentleman that spoke earlier. I work in sound, and the walls in my office are double walled, and the glass in my office is triple paned. and the air traffic actually shakes the walls, and it really interferes with my ability to do my work. I'm often recording, have to stop and restart, and I'm often editing out airplane sounds when I'm doing my work. It's pretty crazy. Now, there are a few things here I'm going to list that have been mentioned, but I think they do bear repeating, which is this increased volume of flights that we have in our neighborhoods all over the valley. I live in the flats of Sherman Oaks, but also up in Bel Air as well. The size of the aircraft that's allowed to fly, the frequency of the flights, the time of day permitted, the extent to which these certain paths repeat, and the altitude. I just ask that these new standards really be looked at very closely by you, our representatives, and try to come up with a plan that works for everybody, that's equitable. I just want to close by saying there's this yoga principle that's called the Sangha, which is a community of harmony and awareness. And I ask that this panel increase their awareness on these issues in pursuit of greater harmony for all of us. We are in great need of more harmony in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lucen Franks, last name Franks.
Yeah, I was waiting for somebody to get that wrong, because they always do. It's okay. I answered everything, really. First of all, thank you, all of you. Everyone who's here, you're here because you want to solve this problem. So I'm grateful to all of you. My name is Lisa Franks, and I'm one of the many residents of the Sherman Oaks Hills that is directly under not one but two flight paths. I get 50% from Van Nuys and 50% from Burbank. I've been to all the meetings. These jet superhighways where hundreds of planes fly directly over my home has made my and my family's lives a living nightmare. I wake up to the sound of planes. I go to sleep to the sound of planes. And when I pull up to my home, I hear or see a plane. I'm tense all the time, and when I do get the occasional and rare moment of silence, I then tense up waiting for the next plane, which, like clockwork, appears within the next minute or two. It's not fair to subjugate one set of residents to endless jet noise and pollution all day and sometimes during the night. NextGen may make sense on some grand level, but in our particular instance, flying the planes into the hills and making them wait to turn until they're in the hills proper wastes both fuel and time for the pilots and the airlines. It damages the health and goodwill of the residents who live directly under a new condensed flight path where no flight path existed prior and none was ever expected. Also, it could lead to a catastrophic accident when there's low altitudes and fire hazard. I live in an area where you have to clear brush. I actually witnessed two large commercial planes crisscrossing paths at very close together. I actually have web track that I can show you. In the 17 years since we moved here, I've never had any reason to complain about either the airplanes or the airports, but I never envisioned a time when I would wear an air noise button around my neck like jewelry and needed to press a button every couple of minutes because it was the only way I could let the FAA know how much their decision has ruined our lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Irene Sandler, Olivia Hernandez-Black, and Clarissa Lurkenfeld-Killer.
Good evening. As a Burbank resident, I'm greatly outnumbered. There's been a few folks here to speak from Burbank. I want to apologize to our neighbors in Studio City and Sherman Oaks for this hell our airport has unleashed on you. There were a number of us that didn't drink the Kool-Aid very early on, back in 2000 and 2016. We did go to our city council. We tried to warn them about NextGen. We told them Phoenix and other cities had fought it successfully. We were ignored. The current mayor told us there's been no changes. I have a cousin in the flight industry. If there were changes, I'd know about it. Well, anyway, here we are today. We are seeing a big difference. I know a number of people talked about buying a house near an airport. Yes, we did. Been there since 1987. There has been an incredible amount of change to us right here in Burbank since then, which means it's worse for you guys. The flights are taking off much lower. We actually have 20 sound meters that were installed by the airport many years ago on top of telephone poles that prove how much noisier it is now, in spite of what our elected officials in Burbank argued with us years ago. Our air pollution, recently a neighborhood kid did a study, a 3-month study. It equals Delhi, India, around the airport. He's got the numbers. We brought that to City Council. Thanks for coming. So I invite all of you here to come to Burbank City Council. They're nice people. You've met a couple of them here tonight. They can be responsive, but we need you there because our airport authority representatives work at the behest of our city council. Please come to our city council and say what you're saying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wiegand.
I just want to make sure you call David Spell, correct? Yes. Thank you. I'm also from Burbank, and I'm so sorry for my brothers and sisters in Studio City and Sherman Oaks and Encino. As Roy just said, we tried to warn our city council members. I do not think that the mayor of Burbank, Pasadena, and Glendale should be on this task force, but I guess it's too late. But I do want to tell you about our chairperson, who is the mayor of Burbank, and also the vice mayor. They voted to reduce our speaking time at our city council meetings from 5 to 3 minutes, and they also eliminated our final comment of the evening so that the residents couldn't get the final say, especially when the former mayor called me a liar and did all kinds of fun things. So we feel your pain. We're so sorry. I will say that it is not fair to say that some, thank you, Burbankers have not borne the brunt of this. I live near the airport. I bought near the airport because that's all I could afford in 1994, and it has never been worse. As soon as NextGen was implemented, they're lower and louder and lower and louder. And I just want to say one other thing. I need a few more seconds because of the applause. Folks, when this airport is expanded, and I will say it's going to be expanded, same number of gates, but thanks to NextGen, you're going to have a tremendous amount. You're going to have way more flights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
I was waiting in the back, sorry. Irene Sandler, Bel Air Beverly Crest Neighborhood Council. I noticed...
Ms. Sandler, speak right into that microphone.
Is this better?
It's much better.
All right.
Thank you.
Bel Air Beverly Crest Neighborhood Council. We are impacted in Bel Air too. Our border is Mulholland. Our border is Laurel Canyon. Our border is Sepulveda. And the last one is Sunset. Thousands of homes, but you're called the South Valley Task Force. I wonder if you would take a moment at another meeting to revise the name, because look at the representation that we have in this room. It's not just the South Valley. I second that. And we really need your help. I don't know how much power you have. I do know that when money is voted for a large project such as NextGen, it's very hard to un-earmark it. I don't know if you can figure it out. I don't know if you can redirect that money within the NextGen family. But somehow, we really need you to be proactive and to tell us what we can do to help you make things better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Olivia Hernandez.
Yes, Olivia Hernandez. I'm from Cagle Canyon in Los Angeles National Forest.
You can move that microphone up, Ms. Hernandez. We won't.
Okay,
There you
thank
go.
you.
Thank you.
All the testimony that I've heard tonight is very far-reaching. I've learned things about what's been going on for the first time, really. And all I know is that in my neighborhood in Cagle Canyon, it used to be very quiet, but now when planes and helicopters, not just from Van Nuys and Burbank, but also Whiting Airport, and helicopters that constantly patrol the fires, because we are in a fire-prone area, it's become pretty frightening, even for my animals who run and take cover to try and get away from the noise. So, and the house shaking, that's a new one. So anyway, it's just my 2 cents that I hope something will be heard. I am a letter writer, and I will write to Adam Schiff and Diane. And I also will write to Mr. Is it Korkorkian or? Okay, okay, sorry. All right, anyway. Okay, I will write. You will be hearing from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clarissa Keller, Elizabeth Hawley, Eileen Graham Moreno, Jennifer
Good evening. My name is Clarissa Lurchenfeld-Keller, and we live in Sherman Oaks. We built our house from scratch on a piece of land where we encountered deer many times over many years, always in October, August through October. None of this is happening since the last 2 years. We have flights both from Van Nuys and Burbank directly above our house several times a day. I just pray and hope that they are at different altitudes. I cannot imagine what will happen. The risks one of those planes will come down is actually quite high if you look at the numbers. And we are in a crazy fire hazard zone. What you guys can do, and thank you all for speaking, do not fly out of Burbank. Drive to LAX, take your car, do not fly out of Burbank. That's what you can do immediately. I rather drive down there, it takes longer, but I will not support this airport anymore. Also, Pasadena, Glendale, Burbank gets all the money. Fly above your own communities that make all the money. We had 54, and that was just during the hours I was home, flights on August 11th. The list goes on with my air noise button. On a Sunday, please give us a break, save our lives, and people, vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Hawley. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Hawley. I'm a Valley Village resident. I'm also a frequent flyer out of Burbank Airport. I'd prefer not to add congestion on the 405, so it's much more convenient. I think it's the most popular airport, was it recently voted? And I also am Legislative Affairs Director at the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, which represents over 420 nonprofits and businesses in the San Fernando Valley, many of whom rely on Burbank Airport and Van Nuys Airport for their business, or their employees rely on flying in and out of those airports to access industries such as the entertainment industry, manufacturing industry. A lot of ideas and investment flow in and out of these airports. So VICA really appreciates that all of you have come tonight and convened this task force so that we can work together. And I know that all of the elected officials here tonight, as well as the airports, have been really considering how to respond to the concerns raised by the community. And this is a great forum to work collectively on some real recommended solutions. Van Nuys and Hollywood Burbank airports have a long and proud history here in the Valley, and they are hugely important to our regional economy. They're important for many people who need to fly in, especially with the new route to Atlanta and the entertainment industry, and those are thousands of middle-class jobs, below-the-line jobs in those industries. So thank you for coming together as a community member and somebody who's representing the business community and nonprofits. We really want to demonstrate to our federal partners that we can work together as a community to find something that works for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eileen Graham Moreno. Eileen Graham Moreno. We're going to have Jennifer Lazarus, Jim Esterly, Mindy Mann, Mike Nolan, and John Woodley.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Lazarus. I was born in Studio City, raised in Studio City. I left my 20s and 30s and then decided to build my own house in Studio City. I was so proud to come back to the community. I have 2 children, 7 and 9 years old. We attend Carpenter Charter Community School. We are proud to be students, and within this community we have such a great school. You can quote me, Kim, Stacy. I think we had 1,257 flights in the month of January over our children's school during school hours. I can go on and on, but I'm really here for my children. We spend time now on the weekends. They're identifying JetBlue, Southwest, UPS. They now know the colors of the planes. We've actually made it like a pool game. We don't have family barbecues. We go to other family members' houses. We just can't get peace and quiet. We saved our money. We built our house. My neighbors are in this room. We are affected by it day and night, just like everybody. all I ask is please think of our children, our schools were affected by it. I beg you, it's like they all say, we go to bed at night, we wake up to it. It's all day. It's enough. Please, please. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
My name is Jim Esterly. I'm a resident of Encino and a member of the Encino Neighborhood Council. First of all, I want to thank you for forming this task force. It's been said that the community is not represented. And I think it's really important that this task force work with the community through many of the neighborhood councils. The Encino Neighborhood Council has formed an airport committee. We have informed people on our committee. They represent the thousands of people in Encino who have been affected by Hollywood Burbank, and particularly the Van Nuys Airport and the amount of traffic, low-flying traffic. So I encourage you to work with the community and listen to what we have to say. The other thing I want to emphasize of this task force is your sense of urgency. We've been dealing in this for 2 years, and I was in a meeting with the FAA recently, and they said any change would take up to 2 years. That's unacceptable. We cannot wait 2 years. If you don't have a sense of urgency, you're not meeting our needs. So I encourage you to address this, and if it means more meetings, more urgently, then we need to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mindy Mann. I live at 9775 Oak Pass Road. That's in Benedict Canyon. I'm about 3/4 of a mile south of Mulholland. I serve on the board of the Benedict Canyon Association. I'm also a representative to our neighborhood council. This is probably about the last place I wanted to be tonight, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but I had to be here tonight because unfortunately my life has been disrupted, and I can't tolerate the nonstop roar of the planes that are flying over my home. It's the first thing that my husband and I hear every single morning at 7 a.m. and the last thing that we hear every night when we go to bed. Other people here have reported exactly the same thing. I also needed to be here tonight because I have a responsibility to the 2,200 plus households that I represent in our canyon. Not everyone is affected directly by the noise, but the new flight patterns over our canyon pose a serious danger to all of our residents because we live in a high fire severity zone. Now, many people have reported that the flights seem to be getting louder and more frequent, and guess what? They're right, because this morning I received an email from Southwest, and what did they say? They announced that now, more than ever, we should fly out of Burbank because there are new routes and more flights. So it's true. So at the very least, I just want to ask one thing of you. Please place a moratorium on additional flights until we have a solution from the task force.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Wooden, and I'm a resident of Studio City. Many residents here have pretty profoundly mixed feelings about this task force, and that's because we've researched the outcomes of similar task forces in other cities, and they don't fill us with confidence. In the Bay Area, the final report indicated that any change would, quote, shift aircraft noise from one community to another, and the FAA cannot support creation of such a procedure without consensus from all affected communities, end quote. But the final report by Landrum and Brown in 2018 proved that the aircraft noise has already shifted to us without consensus, which is why this situation should not require a years-long effort to seek consensus across the San Fernando Valley, because the FAA has already violated its own policy, and so it must be reversed now. Samuel Johnson once said that patriotism is the last refuge of scoundrels. Today, professing safety is another such refuge, and the NextGen emphasis on safety sidesteps that this system's other priority is to improve efficiency, which means profits for the airlines and airports. But there's change in the air. And so to those of you who are or represent elected officials, we'd remind you that just last week, over 200 of America's top CEOs signed a joint letter indicating that profit must cease to be their end-all, be-all mission, that corporations must operate with the greater public good in mind.
Thank you.
If they can do that, then you, our public servants, can prioritize the good of this community over profit-driven NextGen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't forget Mike Nolan.
Hi guys, my name is Ryan O'Keefe.
Sorry,
I'm
before
sorry
you
guys,
start.
my name is Ryan O'Keefe. I'm a Burbank resident, and I want to apologize to all my neighbors and friends for all that is going on right now. This is just appalling what I'm hearing.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to say that the NextGen needs to be scrapped. It has just been awful. The increase in flights have been incredible, and what it's doing to our communities is astounding. We need to scrap the NextGen, but also I want to take a look at the voluntary curfew, because the voluntary curfew is supposed to end at 10 o'clock. I have seen the increase of flights after 10 o'clock, and I understand that it just might be an adjustment for the planes coming in. But now I'm seeing it at 11:30, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. So it is unreal, and I feel for all of those that are in that flight path. So I want to cut mine short to allow other people to come up, but I really want that to be taken a look at and considered as well. Thank you all for your time and for being here this evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Nolan. I don't know why we're going through this. In 1969, I stood on the corner of Laurel Canyon and Ventura Boulevard with a group of people from Sherman Oaks and Studio City. I at the time worked for a councilman named James B. Potter Jr. His successor, Joe Wax, served on the LA City Council for 25 years. We had a problem then. We also went down to Coldwater Canyon and Ventura. They were Air Force planes then out of Van Nuys, not out of Burbank. Something interesting happened since then. Now keep in mind, that was 1969. Now, those people in those neighborhoods are being impacted by flights out of Burbank Airport. The reason Congressman Ed Reineke then could help is because they were Air Force planes. This thing about Burbank is ridiculous. Burbank, the city, and the people are being accused of things that are just not true. It's the FAA that are the lying bastards. I called them back in Washington, and I was invited to attend a roundtable at LAX. No, these planes are taking off at a lower trajectory, making more noise, and you can stop it.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
David Kimball, Louise Schreiner, and Diana Duenas.
I'm Mary Kate Harris. My husband and I own a home in Studio City. We have lived there for 20 years. We actually live in Studio Village, as do other of the attendees here, and our roof line is ground zero for flights out of Burbank. They go directly over our house, and again, all times of night and day. Here's what we're asking for: a fair solution. Fan out the departures across a wider area to fairly distribute air noise. Ascend faster to minimize low-altitude jet noise and toxic exhaust. Include San Fernando Valley community members in solving the problem. Restore the original flight paths that shared the impact of the San Fernando Valley jet noise fairly. We all know, or many of us know, that thank you, that NextGen has not only been rolled out in Southern California. It's been rolled out across the country, and it has been a huge problem across the country. I would like to quote New York Congressman Steve Israel, who said, "It's the Federal Aviation Administration, not the Federal Arrogance Administration."
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
David Kimball.
Hello, my name is David Kimball. I'm a resident of Studio City. I'm not going to tell my personal stories because they're the same as everybody else that's spoken up here. And we would have had a lot more time for us to speak if you had not wasted half an hour with the NextGen sales pitch, which is full of lies that we all know about. If you'd done your homework,
Sir?
you would have... What? What?
Can you just speak to us, please?
Why can't I speak to them? They're here. They're humans. Okay, I'll
You know
look
what?
at you.
Yell at me.
No, I'm not yelling. I'm just speaking loudly and affirmatively.
Speak at
I can tell you, I can show you loud yelling if you would like. Now let's start the clock again, okay, if we may. If somebody had done their homework, they would have known that these people all know about NextGen. We've studied it. We've been living with it for 2 years. So we would have had a lot more time for comment. Second point is, I appreciate all the Burbank residents who've been here and spoken, and I know that they are suffering too. But I'd like to read a quote from you, Ms. Gable-Luddy. "Maximum information needs to be provided because this task force is going to be addressing noise without putting a single Burbank resident at further risk. So it's a very tough balancing act. So if your primary concern is just protecting your voting residents, then you have no business being on this panel, certainly not being chairman. And I suggest that you should recuse yourself from the chairmanship and this panel.
Thank you.
So that we can have a fair, balanced.
Thank you.
One last thing. You took some time to lecture me, so okay. Well, I have a last quote from Samuel L. Jackson that I've used before. "We are sick and tired of these airplanes flying over our homes." Thank you.
Thank you.
Diana Duenas, Dan Becker, Doug Hamlin, and Joyce Gatlin.
Good evening. In the interest of time, my name is Diana Duenas. I'm the CEO of the Encino Chamber of Commerce, and this is Star Tomlinson. She's one of my board members. We just wanted to thank the FAA, the Van Nuys Airport, the Burbank Airport, and the elected officials for your willingness to have this conversation with the community. Van Nuys Airport staff and the airport tenants have always been supportive and willing to work with the communities surrounding the airport on issues from noise to homelessness to graffiti and trash removal in the area, and we appreciate the partnership that Van Nuys Airport and the sense of community that they have. So again, thank you very much and we urge you to continue this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Dan Sager.
Dan Fager. The measurable shift in flight tracks to the south since Metroplex was implemented disputes FAA's claim that controllers handle aircraft departing from Bird today as they did before Metroplex. Controllers vector aircraft as soon as the aircraft reach the minimum vectoring altitude, and the departing aircraft have at least 3 nautical miles lateral or 1,000-foot vertical separation from other aircraft in the airspace. This task force should study in great detail how vectors were instructed before and after Metroplex implementation to determine the accuracy of FAA's state. Web tracks available from the authority confirm that takeoff tracks, turns, and altitudes are now dramatically different, with many departures climbing substantially higher than 3,000 feet before initiating the turn to the west, sometimes as high as 6,000 feet. In other cases, web tracks show fully loaded aircraft on hot days can reach a safe vectoring altitude and turn to the west before crossing the 101 freeway. This task force should recommend to FAA revised permanent RNAV departure that turns aircraft to the west before they cross the 101 freeway. This task force should demand that air traffic control and airlines turn the aircraft to the west immediately as soon as it reaches a safe vectoring altitude. And for our congressional representatives, Congress screwed up when it authorized the implementation of NextGen, but did not also modify eligibility rules for acoustical treatment for residences immediately beneath NextGen jet superhighways. That error should be corrected.
Thank you.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair. Madam Chair. I don't mean to interrupt public comment, but for the sake of the members of the task
Yes,
force
sir.
who may not know because he didn't introduce himself, Mr. Fager is the former executive director of the Hollywood Burbank Airport, the gentleman who just spoke.
Next speaker, please. Thank you. Go ahead, Paul.
Doug Hamlin.
Hello. I'm Doug Hamlin. I live in Toluca Lake, and I think everybody has said, well, I guess you get the idea. The last time I spoke briefly at the meeting of the Airport Commission was earlier this summer. I pointed out that a friend of mine who's a pilot had alerted me to a video on YouTube, which is, I'm sure, still up there, noise abatement at John Wayne Airport. And noise abatement is kind of an umbrella term. It can mean the flight path, the takeoff, the rate of speed, the rate of climb, the turns, where they happen, where they can't happen. It can also refer to throttling back the power of an aircraft at a certain altitude to quiet it down. I played the video, which is about 2 minutes long, which I'm obviously not going to do now.
30 seconds.
The Airport Commission blank stares. They acted like they'd never heard of it. This is the Airport Commission. I'm going to read something very quickly. John Wayne Airport has the Board of Supervisors of Orange County adopted a general aviation noise ordinance that regulates hours of operation, maximum permitted noise levels associated with general aviation operations. I could go on, but you get the idea. Does Burbank Airport have this type of agreement?
Thank you.
You got to have one.
Next we have Joyce Gatlin.
No fault of yours, but every 30 seconds is a plane. Every time she says it, it's a plane. If I were you, I'd be bored. My eyes would be glazing over. This is a long time, and you've been sitting here very patiently. So I'm going to ask you to do something. Look at me. I am your neighbor. I'm the one who has the keys to your house. I'm the one who gets your mail when you're on vacation. I'm the one you call when there's an emergency. These are your neighbors. We're not in contention with one another. We have to work together. Anecdote. My 16-month-old granddaughter's first two-word sentence was airplane loud. My 4-year-old doesn't need flashcards because he said, Grandma, that's number 247 on that plane. And at night, when my husband and I are watching television and we open the door, I have to put on the closed captions. Another plane. I have to put on the closed captions because I cannot hear the television. Good compromise, good negotiation is said to be win-win. All of us who are in business know that that's not the truth. It is lose-lose. We are willing to lose in the compromise. We know we have to. Please, make sure you lose as well.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Jessica Angiati.
I live in Bel Air Hills. I've been here for the last hour and I haven't heard anyone from Bel Air Hills speak, and now I know it's because we're not included in the conversation. We do have the Bel Air Hills Association informing us about the app and things like that, but not about meetings like this. I urge you to please include us because we are also affected. I used to live in Glendale. I left living at the Brand to buy a house in Bel Air Hills for the quiet with my newborn child, and we don't play outside anymore. We don't go outside because it is so loud, and I thought there was a curfew, but we hear them at 1 a.m. They're going off all the time. They're going off before my kid wakes up. Please include us in the conversation so we know what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you all very much. I want to thank you. It's a real eye-opener for us, and I know you've been with it for 2 years. You said that in the beginning. I also want to thank you for being decent about it. I mean, you really did a good job of remaining respectful. And what I'd like to do now is, while the task force is maybe highlighting some of the speakers' requests or options, I'm going to ask Mr. Rendell and his staff who are here this evening if they could help us by summarizing some of the key points that were made this evening. We did a lot of listening. I have some notes. I don't think we can bring the answers directly to you this evening. It's not possible. It's not on the agenda. But we certainly can do a follow-up so that the subsequent meeting we can have some responses to the issues you raised this evening. And you raised many. I mean, the basic one I heard was just put it back to where it was 2 years ago. Now, I heard that, but I want to ask and afford our facilitator the opportunity to summarize those comments that were made that we would consider something that we can either ask the FAA or we can bring back answers to the people who asked them.
Thank you.
Miss, thank you. I hear you. I hear you. Thank you. Mr. Rendell.
Yes. And Madam Chair, if I may.
Mr.
The real pre-NextGen path.
You know,
Not what was on the ground.
I'm going to ask you, thank you so much. Let's go to the next phase and let's go over what the notes are and then what all the notes are that we took when we heard speakers speaking.
Madam Chair, if I may, I know I will be missing a lot of the key points to state them here, try to summarize them. We were taking notes. There's a lot about fairness. There's a lot about spreading the flight paths or dispersing them or looking at turning sooner, turning differently, heading out northwest or east, I mean. So there were a lot of good ideas here. We will go and summarize these over the next couple days, get them out to the airport for them to distribute. And so, you know, there weren't necessarily things that, you know, raised to the level that we would report right now. And I, again, not to do disservice to what we've heard today also, I don't want to leave out something that does have material.
Do task force, good evening, Councilmember Rue. He's joined us, and I assume you've been here for a while. We've been listening. Do task force members have comments that they would like to offer for follow-up? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do, and this is Paul Krikorian, forever taking notes. So first of all, there were a number of speakers who said something to the effect of, imagine it was your home, your kids, and so forth. One speaker said, you know, that she couldn't believe there was no resident on this panel. Well, let me tell you something. I don't need to imagine it because I live in Studio City. I see the flights every single morning. I wake up to the noise. I can identify the branch on the tree in my backyard that the Southwest flight passes every single time. So I know many of you who spoke today, not by being your council member, but because our kids went to the same school, because our kids go to Scouts together, because we shop at the same Trader Joe's together. So believe me when I tell you that I am here not to make things, not to try to speak for the FAA. I'm here to achieve this. I'm here to make sure that this is the outcome that we achieve. And in that respect, Madam Chair, I think that in order to get to this, I think we have to get past this finger-pointing experience that a lot of the people in this community have experienced, where the FAA reports to us, well, there's been no change. Where we hear from pilots, well, it's because of weather changes or something like that. I think we need to really drill down into having the answers to specific questions that this task force should put to the FAA, to the airlines, to the Pilots Association, to Air Traffic Control, and other stakeholders around this airport so that we can get the technical and feasibility answers that we need for how we get to this result. And I have about, I don't know, 3 or 4 pages here of questions that I want to put to staff to report back, to staff of the FAA and staff of the airport, and many questions that I would like to present to the airlines directly, some of which I have already sent to them in the form of a letter. And so what I would propose is that, perhaps the next meeting should be devoted entirely to hearing our presentations from our community members. I suspect that that will take the better part of our meeting to hear from the organizations that have spent so much time and advocacy on this issue. But either at the next meeting or the meeting following that, I'd like to have representatives of either the FAA or the airlines or the airport or some combination of those, staff from those organizations who can respond to specific questions about the history of this. What did happen? When were there changes in the protocols? If there weren't, then what do you attribute this to? So that we can actually have an opportunity to get the information that we need. Because I'm kind of tired of having no one acknowledge even that there has been a change, let alone, that there's a way to fix it. And I think that, and I don't mean that to be, I honestly don't mean to sound as, attacking as I might. Well, I think that's our job. The job of this task force is to figure out how do we get to a community-based solution. And somebody said, that there has to be a compromise and whatever. I don't know. I never heard about NextGen. I never heard about any of these. I represent the people of this neighborhood. Nobody told me about it until I saw the planes going past my bedroom window. That was the first notification I got of this. So this is our opportunity to have a dialogue with this airport and with our federal regulators, and hopefully, as a result of our discussions and engaging the community, our federal representatives will, clearly understand the direction that the communities that are impacted by this airport and their elected representatives want to proceed upon. So that's the work product I hope will come out of this over the next few meetings, that we will actually get an opportunity to get clear, transparent, honest answers, that we'll be able to cross-examine the people who present those answers, and that we'll proceed then to figure out how we get to these simple solutions. So that's my request.
All of your questions are welcome, and I think that it would be great if you could submit them so that they can be made available to everyone. Councilmember Rue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I first wanted to ask, I think there was a lot of community members here who their respective communities weren't aware of this meeting. Would it be possible to open up public comment portion to be a little bit longer where people could submit online, either by email or some other electronic version for those members who weren't here today?
I think it's something we could certainly look into. Our airports are the ones who are working together to bring this task force together, so we'd have to find out how we can do that.
So maybe before...
So that's something that I don't think we can answer tonight, but we can come back with some option.
Or maybe before the next meeting, before we gather, in the next week or so, if we could get an email address where people could submit their comments for those who weren't able to make it today.
I'm sure there's a way that we can manage that.
And I'm sure we could distribute that method out to all the various respective organizations, and I'm sure they'll be able to spread it. And I don't know if I have to make the motion of that, or...
I don't think you need a motion for it. I think what we should do is work on broadening the input as much as we can.
Right. And I just want to just quickly echo what my colleague, Councilmember Paul Krikorian, said. We've been working on this issue for over a year now ourselves, and I am on this committee as well, and this task force, to make sure that this happens as well. I've already have met with numerous, Councilman Krikorian represents Studio City, but I represent on both ends Sherman Oaks and Toluca Lake. And I've met with many of you from my neighborhoods as well as from the neighboring neighborhoods, because obviously a plane doesn't realize it's going through different borders. When a plane goes, it just goes. And you know, it is, we are just as frustrated as you are. But I am committed to a community process, a community input process as vast as possible for us to come to a consensus so we can achieve a fair solution. However, I just want to make it clear why we're so frustrated as well, because we were also not consulted. And I'm not trying to pass the buck here, but you know, whatever we come up with from this task force, all we could do is recommend it to the FAA and ask if they would implement it. So there's nothing to say. We have no jurisdiction over this. And again, it's not even, we work closely with our Congress members, and the FAA, because of the way they're structured and the way it is, they do have authority. So we are working as constructively as possible. And I thank the FAA being here. And in my last trip to Washington, D.C., I met with the FAA, and they have told us, and that's why we're forming this task force today, and I thank Burbank, I thank LAWA, I thank everyone who's here, because they said, come to a community consensus first. And that's what we're trying to do. And we hope that from this community consensus, we come up with additional ideas that we are going to push forward to make sure this happens. But I want you to know, we are your advocates. We will be fighting for you. We are equally frustrated. We are equally seeking answers. And hopefully us collectively together as a voice, including all the different neighborhoods, come to a fair and equitable solution. So thank you.
Thank you. Do other task force members have comments or questions?
I have a comment.
Yes, Mayor Nazarian.
This is Ara Najarian, Mayor of Glendale. Since it was raised by one speaker, maybe two speakers, why am I on this board? Glendale is a member of the Joint Powers Authority that administers the Burbank, Glendale, Pasadena Airport. Although I am not a commissioner, I am mayor of the city that does appoint 3 commissioners to that airport. And furthermore, Glendale does not receive 1 cent from the operations of that airport, not 1 penny. So in case there's any thought that there's some conflict of interest, financial issues, 0. Yes, we get planes flying over our neighborhood. I think they're going on the way to Van Nuys, actually, over Glendale, the UPS planes.
I think I wanted to pass along a couple of notes that I took during the presentations today, and thank you, Mayor. This is Emily Gabeletti. I've heard this before. I think it's a good question. What does topography have to do with the noise? I mean, I would like to get a response or get further investigation into what happens because the hills areas like Studio City and Sherman Oaks echo. Is there a way we can figure that out? So I think you raised a good question. What I'm trying to say, and it's hard because I've never chaired a meeting this big before, is what I'm trying to say is it would be good to have some good foundational information about how topography affects the plains and the echo effect that you all spoke about. I hear, so that would be my question. The other thing was, two of the speakers talked about the FAA has a rule that says you shouldn't move noise into new areas and that this shouldn't be done. I would like to know more about what that rule says. I know you've done the research, you've been through it already, but I'm asking because I heard some of the comments that were raised. I'm not asking for an answer tonight. Then someone also asked if there could be more noise monitors. So I know from the city of Burbank, there are noise monitors at key points in the departure areas, in the flight path. Our former mayor lived under the flight path. And we know that there's WebTrack and that provides some of the information, but it's a general question about locating more noise monitors under the flight path areas. And I ask this not because I don't believe anybody's positions tonight. I mean, it was very clear. I'm asking it because I think we need foundational data to get to the point that the Councilman Krikorian was talking about, where we can reach a point of consensus and move forward together. All right, so I'm going to ask everybody to just wait till we're completely done with this part of the meeting while I work my way through. I can't do it quickly because I'm looking at all the notes that were taken. While I'm looking at notes, do any other task force members have any questions that they think should be brought forward?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. This is Mike Aguilera. I would like, since this is an organizational meeting, to see what it would take, which is a vote of the voting members of the body, to add additional members like Mr. Torres of LAUSD. If we can do that just by a simple majority vote, we can look at what kind of rules it would be to add a member to the body.
I would. One of the speakers talked about having, they have an airport subcommittee on their neighborhood council. And to the extent the neighborhood councils surrounding Van Nuys or Burbank Airport have subcommittees, I think that would be an excellent group of community members to participate in community presentations. I think it was the man from Encino who said this. But Van Nuys, I think also, Van Nuys homeowners or Van Nuys Neighborhood Council may have one as well. So that, I think, would be helpful in terms of understanding community presentation. And I want to ask my colleagues from Los Angeles, if you are aware in your neighborhood councils, which ones might have similar committees or committees that deal with that represent the community?
I think I can speak for all of us in saying we are acutely aware of all the neighborhood councils in our district.
I'm sure you are. That's good.
And I think I can speak for all of us in saying that each of us will invite all of them to, if they're interested in doing it, to make presentations. And as we discussed at the outset, we'll have to determine who's interested in doing that, how much time they would need, and so on. I don't know that it would be productive to have, more repetition of impacts so much as it would be what I expect we will receive from the community organizations, from,
All right.
Quiet Skies and Uproar and the other community organizations, which is actually, a formal presentation. And so if neighborhood councils are prepared to do that, I think,
Thank you.
that's what we will do in determining whether or not they are interested in participating.
Okay, we are at the 9:30 hour, and I know we do have to clear out of this room. Did you have one final? Here's your microphone on, Mike.
Chair, I noticed in the audience that there was some question about the scope of other individuals who might be added to this panel. I know we mentioned the Los Angeles School District, but I did notice that there were other entities or possible individuals, and I think there was a lack of clarification in terms of how wide that would be, in terms of consideration for when we get feedback on that.
Okay, thank you.
That struck me as something I understood was important to community members.
Vice Mayor Springer from Burbank, and then we'll have to wrap it up, I think.
Thank everybody for coming.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Springer first, and then you're next.
Yeah, I would like to thank everybody for coming, and I really appreciate your comments. And I'm wondering if we may get this map larger scale that has the locations that were mentioned. There were, I could make a summary of them, but I'm sure you have them in your notes also, so we can see the before and after, the 2016 and 2018 with the different locations.
Thank you. You want to see a bigger version of that?
Yeah, a larger scale.
A larger version. All right.
Well, I heard a larger version as well as where those communities are located on that map.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Jared Thompson with the Office of Councilmember Koretz. I would like to make one formal request. I don't think it requires a name change, but we do need to include the communities in the Santa Monica Mountains in this conversation, as they live in a high fire severity zone, and this is a very dangerous concept.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
So,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, just
Yes.
really quickly, I just wanted to restate what the Congressmember Adam Schiff's representative stated. If we could maybe agendize at a later meeting the idea that was brought forth from Congressman Adam Schiff's office of entertaining additional members, possibly from the community.
Possibly.
So if we could talk about that.
Make that a question. Next agenda item. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Lauren, Councilwoman Martinez's office. I did want to make a request. I did want to ask if the noise impacts to Van Nuys and Lake Balboa could be presented on if this plan was reverted to the old paths, what the noise impacts would be for those residents. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Council members, task force members, my suggestion would be that we do everything we can to meet in 2 weeks.
Okay.
By September 11th. I hope that you'll all join me in that. It's going to require a lot of quick work, but I think that we would be better off if we move into the presentations both from the FAA and from the community presenters as quickly as possible. We're going to close tonight's meeting. I want to thank you all. It is my deepest appreciation for your attention, and frankly, I want to thank you for your civility. We all realize how tough this is. I also want to thank the FAA for being here and listening to tonight's proceedings and all of your comments. I understand and respect that you're totally frustrated, but we are going to start walking on a consensus basis, and I hope at the end of 6 months we will indeed come up with something that's going to be actionable by the FAA. Thank you very much.
Madam
Good
Chair.
night, everyone.